I don't believe it would be wise to continue this battle any further, fellow Taoist Lu Jai. Let's make a retreat, Zhu Han said to Lu Jai through voice transmission. My sword has already been drawn several inches out of its scabbard. I can't just sheath it again for no good reason, Lu Jai replied in a cold voice. As soon as his voice trailed off, he drew his longsword completely out of its scabbard, sending an enormous streak of white sword qi hurtling directly upward. Impressive, Dowist Hu Yan chuckled as he swept a hand through the air, and a crimson longsword appeared behind him out of thin air. The golden spirit patterns on the sword's blade were glowing radiantly, and there was a massive sword projection that was over 10,000 feet in length around it. Crimson flames were surging out of either side of the sword projection, resembling a pair of giant fiery wings that had spread open in the sky. All of a sudden, the air temperature within a radius of hundreds of kilometers elevated sharply, and scorching heat permeated throughout the entire area. At the same time, the spirit patterns on the giant black axes wielded by all of the Black Dao warriors also lit up with scorching flames, and they lashed out at the azure-armored Dao warriors and ubiquitous pavilion cultivators. The holy puppet sect cultivators had already resigned themselves to death, and all of them were so elated by this turn of events that many of them had burst into tears. All of the sudden, the tide of the battle was turned once again. Zhu Han heaved a faint sigh upon seeing this, and he was just about to fly toward Lu Jai when Yun Nai and Bai Fengyi rose up into the air to get in his way. With that, the melee on the plaza resumed. On the thunderstorm sea, somewhere hundreds of thousands of kilometers away from the holy puppet sect, Han Li was standing in midair, facing Jeang Luan from afar. He had used his lightning teleportation formation several times up to this point, but he had been unable to shake off Jeang Luan. You won't be able to escape from me even if you flee to the corners of this realm, Han Li, Jeang Luan declared as a mocking sneer appeared on his face. That's quite a bit of insolence from someone who's only gained some slight mastery over Baleful Qi laws. It looks like you're not much better than that idiot junior martial brother of yours, Han Li jeered. A cold look appeared in Jeang Luan's eyes upon hearing this. I didn't think you would be able to identify my Baleful Qi laws. It appears I may have underestimated you. I'm assuming you've been using Baleful Qi to track me this entire time and to unleash those sneak attacks against me, right? Han Li chuckled. Indeed, the reality is that you've been bringing me with you this entire time, and I haven't had to do anything, Jeang Luan openly admitted with a mocking sneer on his face. Han Li's expression remained unchanged upon hearing this, but internally, he was rather intrigued. He didn't actually know much about Baleful Qi laws as it was a very uncommon type of laws, so he wasn't familiar with what was special about it. That black thread that Jeang Luan had shot into his body earlier was one that had been manifested from Baleful Qi laws, and through it, he seemed to be able to track his location and teleport himself to his side. Aside from that, Han Li could also clearly sense a violent and baleful energy accumulating in his heart. Even with his enormous spiritual sense, he was unable to forcibly suppress it, and the more he tried to do so, the quicker this baleful energy grew. Han Li had a feeling that once this baleful energy developed to a certain point, that would be when his opponent would unleash his killing blow. Hence, the best course of action would be to finish this battle as soon as possible. With that in mind, Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to summon his heavy water true axis amid a flash of black light, then sent it hurtling directly toward Jeang Luan. A faint smile appeared on Jeang Luan's face, and instead of taking any evasive measures, he flew directly toward the axis. In the instant that the heavy water true axis was about to crash into his body, he transformed into a cloud of black mist once again, allowing him to pass through completely unscathed. Han Li immediately made a hand seal upon seeing this, and the water Dao rune on the heavy water true axis began to glow brightly, while the axis itself swelled to around twice its original size and began to revolve rapidly. All of the water attribute spiritual qi in the area was churned up into a frenzy by the axis, which was releasing bursts of incredibly powerful tearing force, and it didn't take long before an enormous vortex took shape on the surface of the sea. All of a sudden, the cloud of black mist that Jeang Luan had transformed into was sucked into the vortex, quickly vanishing into it before he had a chance to react. However, Han Li knew that this was far from the end of the battle, and he made a beckoning motion to draw the heavy water true axis back to himself, where it hovered in the air in front of him. As a result, the vortex of water that had risen up into the heavens cascaded back down into the sea, raising a series of massive waves as it did so. However, even after the waves had completely subsided, Jeang Luan was still nowhere to be seen. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. Just now, a burst of aggression had risen up inexplicably in his heart without any warning, and wisps of black mist were also beginning to seep out of his glabella. Right at this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared in the seawater down below, much like the ink of a squid, and it quickly spread to stain all of the seawater in a radius of over 10,000 feet black. Black waves began to churn incessantly on the surface of the sea, with wisps of black mist surging out from within. All of a sudden, a series of enormous waves rose up from all directions like a giant black flower, and its petals closed in around Han Li, attempting to devour him whole. Han Li immediately tried to take evasive measures, but right this moment, a flash of black light suddenly appeared on his glabella, and he was struck by a burst of sharp pain in his consciousness. As a result, he was momentarily immobilized, and before he could do anything else, he was completely enveloped within the black wave along with his heavy water true axis. Han Li inspected his surroundings to find that he was situated in a completely pitch-black space. Through the use of his bright-sight spirit eyes, he was able to see wisps of black mist hovering in the air around him, but he was unable to see very far through it. At the same time, he discovered that his spiritual sense had also been severely limited, and at this moment, all he could sense was a seemingly boundless expanse of baleful qi around him. He took a deep breath before sweeping a sleeve through the air, and his heavy water true axis immediately began to revolve rapidly before launching itself forward. A dull thud rang out as the heavy water true axis struck a wall of water, which shuddered violently a few times before releasing wisps of black mist to ensnare the heavy water true axis, rendering it completely immobilized. The more immortal spiritual power he tried to inject into the heavy water true axis, the tighter the surrounding wisps of black mist bound themselves to the axis. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he made a hand seal with one hand, and an azure longsword shot out of his sleeve, then split up into 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords amid a flash of azure light before flying away in all directions. Each sword was glowing with azure light that was releasing more azure sword projections, amounting to several thousand sword projections that instantly filled the entire surrounding space. If there were anyone situated outside this inky black space at this moment, then they would be able to see that it was a black ball with a diameter in excess of 1,000 feet, and it was hovering above the sea, constantly absorbing the inky black seawater down below. At the same time, countless bulges were appearing incessantly on the surface of the black ball, stretching it into an irregular shape and making it resemble a spiky black ball. Situated in the sky not far away from the spiky ball was a black crane with a golden crown and a metallic black plumage that had a faint fiery sheen, indicating that this was no ordinary creature. Atop the crane's back sat Jeang Luan with his legs crossed. His black saber was resting across his hands, and he was staring intently at the black ball up ahead. All of the spirit patterns on the surface of the black saber were flashing incessantly, and black Qi was also surging over its blade. "He's causing quite a ruckus in there, Master," the black crane said in a high-pitched voice as it swiveled its head around to face Jeang Luan. "No matter. The more violently he struggles, the faster the baleful aura would converge, and the more he'll be corroded by my baleful aura. When he's completely spent and exhausted, that's when we'll put an end to his life," Jeang Luan replied with a smile. "We wouldn't have to go through so much trouble if we weren't trying to uncover the secrets that he's harboring. There's no way he would be able to withstand your Black Emperor Immortal slaying blade, Master," the black crane said in a fawning voice. "I'm truly curious about secrets Fang Pan was so desperate to uncover. If I can uncover all of those secrets, that would certainly be worth all the extra time and effort I'm investing here," Jeang Luan said. As the two of them were conversing with one another, the unrest in the black ball gradually began to fade until it had completely subsided, and at this point, all of the black seawater had already been fused into the black ball. However, strangely enough, not only had the black ball not become any larger, it had shrunk down significantly instead, and at this moment it was resembling a giant black crystal. "Looks like it's about time," Jeang Luan declared as he rose to his feet atop the black crane's back, then sprang up into the air and flew over to the black ball before gently laying a hand upon it. A burst of black light suddenly appeared at the center of his palm before transforming into a black vortex, and a plume of black smoke immediately surged out of the black ball before entering Jeang Luan's body through the vortex. As more and more black smoke emerged, the black ball shrank down further and further, and Han Li's figure was gradually revealed. At this moment, his entire body was completely stiff and still, and his eyes were tightly shut. The Baleful Qi law thread on his glabella had already disappeared, having been replaced by an inky black baleful rune that appeared as if it had become a part of his body. The 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords and the heavy water true axis beside him were all enveloped in a thin layer of black crystal, and they were struggling to break free, but unable to do so. Jeang Luan gave a pleased nod upon seeing this, then raised a finger toward the baleful rune on Han Li's glabella. As soon as his fingertip came into contact with the baleful rune, all of the secrets hidden in Han Li's mind would immediately be fully revealed to him. However, right at this moment, Han Li's eyes suddenly sprang open, and a flash of blue light appeared in his pupils. A translucent thread then shot out of his glabella to shatter the baleful rune before hurtling directly toward Jeang Luan's glabella. Jeang Luan was clearly caught off guard by this turn of events, and he reflexively sprang back, but didn't take any measures to try and ward off the translucent thread, merely allowing it to fly toward his own glabella. All of a sudden, a burst of azure light erupted out of the copper headgear on his forehead, and a projection of a four-eyed tiger-like beast emerged before opening its mouth to devour the translucent thread. Meanwhile, a layer of golden scales had already appeared over Han Li's arm, and his fist was glowing with radiant golden light as he threw an almighty punch toward Jeang Luan's chest. Jeang Luan forcibly suppressed his own bewilderment as he hurriedly raised his saber before him, then pressed a hand against the flat of the blade to brace it against Han Li's punch. A resounding boom rang out as a burst of golden light exploded in the sky, and Jeang Luan was sent flying back like an asteroid from the force of the clash, crashing heavily down onto the surface of the sea to raise a flurry of massive waves. Han Li didn't stop there, making a hand seal with both hands before sweeping his sleeves through the air, and the 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords immediately shattered the black crystal around them, then flew through the air as streaks of azure light before plunging into the sea in pursuit of Jeang Luan. At the same time, the water Dao rune on the heavy water true axis abruptly lit up, and it also broke free from the black crystalline material before crashing down toward the surface of the sea. All of this had taken place in the span of just a few seconds, and only after this sequence of events had unfolded did the massive black crane in the sky finally react before flapping its wings vigorously downward. The fiery black light on its wings brightened considerably, and they released a pair of massive black fireballs that hurtled toward the heavy water true axis. Two resounding booms rang out in succession, as black flames erupted over the surface of the heavy water true axis, diverting it slightly to the side, and causing it to plow through the sea for a moment before it righted itself and continued to fly back toward Han Li. Han Li only took a brief glance at the giant black crane before directing his gaze back to the surface of the sea. Deep in the water, a black shadow rapidly rose upward before flying out into the open with a black saber held tightly in his hand, and he lashed out behind him without any hesitation. The spirit patterns on the surface of the saber light up, and one saber projection after another swept toward the sea like waves crashing against the shore. Immediately thereafter, a series of glowing azure flying swords flew out of the water amid a string of splashes, and they crashed into the waves of saber projections with a piercing grinding sound. The black saber projections were shattered one after another, while the azure longswords were also stopped in their tracks. Meanwhile, Jeang Luan continued to fly back through the air before landing on the black crane's back, and he cast a furious gaze toward Han Li. "I didn't think that you were able to free yourself from the corruption of my baleful Qi. Even if your spiritual sense far exceeds that of your peers, there's no way you should have been able to do that. Could it be that you've cultivated the forbidden spirit refinement technique?" Jeang Luan asked. Han Li remained silent, displaying no intention of offering any response. He swept his sleeves through the air, and the 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords immediately flew back to him, fusing into a single azure longsword before landing in his grasp. "It looks like you really are harboring many secrets. No wonder Fang Pan was so determined to hunt you down. I'm really looking forward to capturing your nascent soul and seeing everything concealed in it," Jeang Luan chuckled. "Silence is a virtue," Han Li said with an indifferent expression, following which the mantra-treasured axis in his body abruptly began to revolve in reverse. At the same time, over 40 of the time Tao runes on the mantra-treasured axis lit up at once, and he instantly vanished from the spot, not even leaving any afterimages in his wake before appearing on the black crane's back as if through instantaneous teleportation. Before Jeang Luan even had a chance to figure out what had happened, Han Li's azure longsword had already been plunged through his heart. Jeang Luan's eyes widened with incredulity as he looked down at the sword protruding out of his chest and the black blood that was pouring out of the wound, which had already seeped through his robes. "Master," the black crane screeched in a shrill voice. Meanwhile, Han Li pulled his longsword out of Jeang Luan's chest without any hesitation before darting back through the air. He had only just flown off the black crane's back when Jeang Luan's body disintegrated into a cloud of black mist. As it turned out, that had only been a clone formed by Baleful Qi. A cloud of black smoke then appeared elsewhere in the sky, and Jeang Luan re-emerged. At this point, all of the mockery in his eyes had been replaced by a cold and solemn look. Han Li was feeling a little frustrated. His mantra-treasured axis still hadn't recovered all 108 of its time Tao runes yet, so he wasn't able to fully utilize his reversal true axis ability. As a result, he was unable to instantly slay an opponent of Jeang Luan's caliber with a single strike. "I have indeed underestimated you. I didn't think that you would have also mastered the laws of speed just like Fang Pan, and your speed is even superior to his. No wonder you were able to kill him," Jeang Luan said with a serious expression. Han Li naturally wasn't going to correct Jeang Luan's misevaluation of his law powers, and he asked, The fact that you were able to survive that blow must have something to do with Fang Pan, right? That's right. I did indeed prepare that clone as a safeguard against that junior martial brother of mine. He was developing a little too quickly, so I had no choice but to be wary of him, and I certainly didn't think that the clone would save me from someone else instead. Jeang Luan mused. As he was speaking, he was discreetly making a string of hand seals with one hand concealed behind his back. The circles of strange patterns on the palm of his hand began to glow with crimson light, and the skin beneath his black cloak was also beginning to take on a red coloration. A hint of fear and alarm flashed through the black crane's eyes upon seeing this, and two balls of black light were flashing beneath its wings, clearly indicating that it was preparing itself to flee the scene at any moment. Han Li had naturally noticed all of this, but his expression remained completely unchanged. His heavy water true axis was hovering in front of him like a shield, and he held his azure longsword in one hand, while in his other hand were two balls of heavy water-veined lightning, which he kept concealed up his sleeve. A burst of chanting rang out as Jeang Luan's pupils turned a crimson color, and wisps of red mist began to rise up from his body. At the same time, his black saber was also gradually taking on a crimson hue. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he could sense a clear change in Jeang Luan's aura. He could still detect Baleful Qi rising up from his body, but it wasn't the same type of aggressive Baleful Qi as before. "It's time to put an end to this battle," Jeang Luan declared as he vanished from the spot as a crimson shadow. In the next instant, he appeared below Han Li to his right before slashing his saber diagonally upward, lashing out at Han Li from an extremely awkward angle. Han Li seemed to have already anticipated this, and he swung his long sword downward to clash against the crimson saber, then took advantage of the impact of the clash to fly back through the air and open up some distance between himself and Jeang Luan. At the same time, the two balls of heavy water-veined lightning had slipped out of his sleeve and fallen down in front of Jeang Luan. The purple lightning veins on the surface of the balls of veined lightning abruptly lit up, immediately following which came a thunderous explosion. A devastating halo of purple lightning spread through the air in all directions, encompassing the entire surrounding area in a radius of several thousand feet. Before the first explosion had a chance to subside, the other ball of heavy water-veined lightning also lit up, but the lightning veins on this one were golden instead of purple. Another violent explosion rang out, and two enormous black suns rose up above the surface of the sea one after the other, while golden and purple lightning flashed incessantly. The eruption of light was so bright that it was impossible to see Jeang Luan within it, and the sea down below churned violently as countless tiny black specks of heavy water erupted in all directions, causing the surrounding space to shudder violently. The explosions had released waves of spherical shockwaves that swept up enormous waves over the surface of the sea, and the black crane had already fled into the distance as a ball of black flames. At this moment, it was hovering in the sky over 100,000 feet away, looking back at Han Li and Jeang Luan with a fearful look in its eyes. "It looks like the divine Devilbane lightning is still the more powerful of the two," Han Li remarked to himself as he looked at the purple and golden lightning that was flashing above the surface of the sea. Out of the two balls of heavy water-veined lightning that he had just tossed out, one of them had been refined using the power of the purple crystalline that he had obtained from the thunderstorm sea, while the other one had been refined using divine Devilbane lightning following latest refinement of his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords. Of the former, he had already expended far too many of them while carrying sect and transient guild missions, so he didn't have many left, and as for the former, that was very difficult to refine, so he didn't have many of those either. Having just detonated one of each, It was clear that the heavy water-veined lightning that was infused with divine devil-bane lightning was the more formidable of the two. As the explosion subsided, torn scraps of a black cloak could be seen floating on the surface of the sea, and there was a cloud of blood mist hanging in the air. But instead being elated to see this, a grim look appeared in Han Li's eyes. He could sense Jeang Luan's aura permeating throughout the entire surrounding area, in a radius of tens of thousands of feet. Right at this moment, the surface of the sea, which had already been stained crimson, began to bubble and froth, and it didn't take long before a layer of large bubbles had appeared over the entire surface of the sea in a radius of several hundred kilometers. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he cast his gaze toward that area to find the crimson sea churning incessantly. Turbulent waves were surging on its surface, while over 100 massive shadows were slowly rising up from the depths, bringing with them an overwhelmingly nauseating bloody odor. Han Li activated his spirit refinement technique to protect his consciousness, and he unconsciously tightened his grip on his sword as he inspected the surface of the sea with blue light flashing in his eyes. Finally, all of the shadows rising up from below emerged out of the water one after another, revealing them to have been a series of different marine demon beasts of all types of different descriptions. Han Li had seen all of these demon beasts in some of the books that he had read in the past, and he knew that their cultivation bases varied drastically, with the most powerful ones among them already at the true immortal stage. But at this moment, all of them were floating belly up on the surface of the sea, and they couldn't have been any more dead. Each of them had a giant round hole in their abdomen, from within which blood was pouring out incessantly, spreading through the seawater like a massive crimson veil. Han Li could see that the skin and flesh around those wounds were spread outward, indicating that their bodies had detonated from the inside, rather than the injuries being a result of external force. All of a sudden, a near animalistic roar rang out, and massive waves swept over the surface of the sea down below. A massive crimson hand that was over 1,000 feet in size suddenly parted the waves and reached out of the sea to make a grab for Han Li, who immediately darted back in an attempt to avoid it. However, right as he did so, another identical giant crimson hand emerged from the water right in the path of his retreat, before grabbing toward him as well. Han Li hurriedly changed directions as a streak of azure light, but right at this moment, two more massive crimson hands emerged, one in front of him and one behind, and they were closing in on him from both directions. The huge crimson hands were astonishingly fast, to the point that Han Li was caught between them before he had a chance to react. Immediately thereafter, the seawater began to churn violently, and an enormous figure that was over 10,000 feet tall slowly rose up from the depth. As it turned out, it was a giant crimson figure with clearly defined muscular lines all over its body, and it was completely naked with the exception of an azure loincloth around its waist. It was like a giant that had just been skinned, and there was still blood all over its exposed muscles. Its face was extremely twisted and horrific, but some semblance of Jeang Luan could still be seen in it. Aside from the pair of arms attached to its shoulder, the crimson giant had a pair of arms growing from beneath its ribs as well, and it was none other than the hands attached to that lower pair of arms that Han Li was trapped between. At this moment, Han Li felt as if he were being crushed between a pair of massive mountains, and his bones were creaking and groaning incessantly. He let loose a loud roar as a layer of golden scales appeared over both of his arms, and he pushed back at the pair of giant palms with all his might. With his tremendous strength, he was able to push the giant palms slightly to the sides to open up a small gap. The crimson giant immediately let loose a thunderous roar in response, and it exerted even more force through its hands, forcibly eliminating the gap that Han Li had just barely created between them. Han Li's face was bright red as he let loose a low roar, and in the next instant, all of his muscles began to bulge as his body swelled up rapidly like a balloon, quickly transforming into a giant golden ape that was over 10,000 feet tall. At the same time, white light appeared over his body, and 7 specks of blue starlight appeared on his chest and abdomen, while his body swelled even further in size. The giant ape let loose another low roar as it glowered at the crimson giant, then spread its arms open forcefully. And not only was it able to force the crimson giant's hands apart, it was able to grab onto them as well. The golden ape then twisted its own arms, forcing the crimson giant's hands outward, and the sound of cracking bone instantly rang out, immediately followed by a roar of pain. However, at the same time, the crimson giant reached out with its other 2 hands to lock the golden ape's arms in a vice-like grip. Immediately thereafter, it began to chant an incantation in a rumbling voice, and as it did so, a series of strange corkscrew-shaped patterns on the palms of the hands that were locked around the giant ape's arms, and a pair of crimson snakes slithered out before winding themselves around the golden ape's arms. Han Li immediately felt a burst of scorching pain shoot through his arms, and he hurriedly released the crimson giant's hands before stumbling back around a dozen steps. After opening up some distance between himself and the crimson giant, Han Li looked down to find circles of corkscrew-shaped marks running all the way up his arms to his shoulders, and it was as if it had been branded into his skin. "With my baleful blood mark on your body, you're as good as dead," the crimson giant declared in such a thunderous voice that the surrounding space was quivering incessantly. As soon as his voice trailed off, it continued to chant its incantation, and a series of giant crimson runes began to appear over its body. Han Li could feel the scorching pain in his arms becoming more intense by the second, and he leaned forward to plunge his arms into the seawater in an attempt to lessen the pain, but to no avail. What was even more alarming was that all of his blood essence was currently surging violently through his body like a wild horse that had been let off its reins. He could clearly sense that the temperature of his blood essence was rapidly rising, as if it were about to be set alight, and it wouldn't be long before it tore through his veins, causing his body to detonate. If it weren't for the fact that he was a profound immortal with a physical body far more formidable than the average true immortal, and he had cultivated the organ refinement origin arts, his organs would have most likely already exploded by now. Han Li was astonished by this turn of events. The Baleful Qi law powers being wielded by his opponent was extremely difficult to deal with. First, it was the violent Baleful Qi that had swayed his spiritual sense, and now, this burst of blood Baleful Qi was attempting to control his blood essence. He took a moment to compose himself, then attempted to quell the unrest in his blood essence using his immortal spiritual power, but to no avail once again. With so many types of power true spirit blood essence infused into his bloodline, his blood essence was far more powerful than that of the average true immortal, and it was impossible for him to suppress it with his immortal spiritual power alone. All of a sudden, a draconic roar rang out from within Han Li's body, following which a giant 5-clawed golden dragon projection emerged behind him amid a flash of golden light before roaring to the heavens. The giant ape's face became twisted with agony, and it also let loose a roar of pain. "You possess a true spirit bloodline in your body. This is fantastic. The heavens are truly smiling down upon me," the crimson giant exclaimed in an elated voice. It then made a strange hand seal with all 4 of its massive hands, and a series of crescent-shaped runes appeared over its body, shimmering with a magma-like crimson and yellow glow. Immediately thereafter, a clear phoenix cry rang out, and a rainbow phoenix projection emerged behind Han Li as well, hanging in midair right next to the golden dragon. The black crane, which had already retreated to over 100,000 feet away, was very surprised to see this. He has more than one type of true spirit bloodline in his body. Normally, possessing multiple true spirit bloodlines would be a great asset, but given Master's abilities, those true spirit bloodlines will only work against him. The black crane chuckled. As soon as its voice trailed off, an azure Luan bird projection appeared behind the giant ape amid a flash of azure light, followed by a lightning bird projection amid a flash of silver lightning. Immediately thereafter came the projections of a five-colored peacock and a giant black turtle. Impossible, how could he have this many? The black crane exclaimed in an incredulous voice. At this moment, it wanted nothing more than to grow a pair of hands to rub its own eyes. It was simply in complete disbelief that someone could possess so many powerful true spirit bloodlines, particularly a human, which had the weakest physical body among all races. Another agonized roar erupted out of the giant ape's mouth, and the true spirit projections hovering behind it suddenly began to struggle violently, with someone trying to rise up into the heavens and others trying to descend into the sea. The crimson marks on the giant ape's arms also began to glow brightly, and the unrest in its blood essence was becoming even more violent, causing it to crash through its veins like a wild bull. This scorching sensation that came from within his body was even more painful than having his skin peeled and his bones plucked out. Han Li could sense that the blood essence in his body was only continuing to grow more violent, and it would break out of his body as soon as it reached a certain threshold. Once that happened, he would end up just like those dead marine demon beasts floating on the surface of the sea. The crimson giant could tell that Han Li was close to reaching his limits, and a ghastly smile appeared on its hideous face as it roared, "It's time for you to die." With this declaration, Han Li immediately felt the agony in his body increase by severalfold, and it was as if there were countless sharp needles piercing back and forth through his meridians and even his bones. A layer of faint golden light appeared in his eyes, and he threw his head back and let loose a thunderous roar as he gave up on trying to suppress his blood essence with his immortal spiritual power, dedicating it fully to activating his provenance true devil arts instead. A layer of purplish golden scales appeared over his body, and two fearsome-looking heads and four purplish golden arms emerged on his shoulders and below his ribs, respectively. The 6 eyes on the 3 giant ape heads sprang open in unison, and a short silver horn appeared on the forehead of the 2 heads on either side of the central one. After unleashing his holy nirvana physique, the true spirit projections that were threatening to break free flew back into his body one after another, and as a result, Han Li grew significantly taller once again, allowing him to tower over the crimson giant. The purplish golden scales all over his body connected together to form a suit of purplish golden armor with countless antiquated runes inscribed onto its surface, and it encased Han Li's entire body while giving off an extremely formidable aura. In the distance, Jeang Luan was looking on with an astonished expression. He couldn't understand for the life of him how Han Li had managed to escape from the control of his baleful blood mark, and a sense of unease had welled up in his heart at the sight of this new transformation that Han Li had adopted. In reality, Han Li wasn't confident that his provenance true devil arts would be able to suppress the true spirit blood essence in his body, and he had only unleashed so that all of his true spirit bloodlines would be unified and guided to a collective cause, rather than continuing to rampage under the effects of the baleful blood mark. Back in the spirit realm, he would often use all of his true spirit bloodlines to unleash his holy nirvana physique, so this was not an alien process to him. His 3 heads grinned in unison, following his 6 giant arms flash through the air in a blur, unleashing countless projections that hurtled directly toward Jeang Luan. All of a sudden, countless golden fist projections emerged to obscure the entire sky before abruptly vanishing into the thin air. Almost at the exact same moment, the space around the Crimson Giant surged and churned violently, and countless golden fist projections emerged out of thin air before crashing toward it with devastating force. The Crimson Giant immediately raised its four arms and swung them rapidly through the air to unleash a flurry of fist projections of its own, and a string of resounding booms rang out incessantly. Before the clashes between the golden and crimson fist projections had a chance to subside, an enormous figure sprang up into the air, then came crashing down upon the Crimson Giant like a mountain. Raised above the enormous figure's head was a huge crimson longsword, which was also being swung down with tremendous force. In response, the Crimson Giant raised two of its hands and made a grabbing motion to conjure up a huge crimson saber, which it used to parry the massive azure longsword. A thunderous boom rang out as the azure sword struck the crimson saber, sending a burst of astonishing force crashing down. The Crimson Giant was forced to one knee, and the back of its huge saber had also sunk deep into the flesh on its shoulder. At the same time, massive waves swept over the surface of the sea, and even countless fish and marine demon beasts that were situated thousands of kilometers away were killed from the force of the almighty blow. After forcing the Crimson Giant to one knee, Han Li strode forward before stomping a foot down onto the giant's chest. Crimson light flashed within the giant's eyes, and a massive opening abruptly appeared on its chest, within which were countless jagged white fangs that closed in viciously around the giant ape's leg like an enormous bear trap. However, all it saw was a blur flash before its eyes, following which it was struck by a burst of sharp pain in the chest. As it turned out, the white fangs in its chest didn't even get a chance to open up before it was trodden on by the giant ape's foot, instantly snapping several dozen of them. Furthermore, such was the force behind the enormous ape's stomp that a massive hole had sunken into the Crimson Giant's chest. The Crimson Giant threw up a mouthful of blood as it thrust its long saber upward with all its might, while punching at the giant ape with its other two hands. The giant ape didn't back down, continuing to force its sword downward while retaliating with its four remaining fists. The Crimson Giant's two arms were no match for the ferocious barrage from the giant ape's four arms, and it was being comprehensively dominated. A string of loud thumps rang out, and all of the seawater down below was quivering incessantly with every single thump. Before long, the Crimson Giant's chest and arms had been pummeled into a mangled mass of flesh and blood, presenting a sorry sight to behold. Right at this moment, Han Li suddenly reached out with two of his hands to grab onto the pair of arms that Jeang Luan was using to hold his saber. As a result, he was able to liberate his sword-wielding arms, and he pulled the sword back before slashing it toward the Crimson Giant's head. The Crimson Giant was greatly alarmed by this turn of events, and it immediately attempted to take evasive measures, but it was unable to go anywhere as it was being crushed under the giant ape's weight. A thunderous howl rang out as half of its head was cut off by the Crimson Longsword, and having lost its head, the Crimson Giant's four arms instantly slumped down in a limp manner. "Master," the Black Crane called out in alarm from afar. Never in all of its years by Jeang Luan's side had it ever seen him be reduced to such a sorry state, and its eyes were filled with wariness as it cast its gaze toward Han Li. All of a sudden, the giant ape raised a hand, and a burst of golden light appeared on its palm as it prepared to lash out at what remained of the Crimson Giant's head. However, all of a sudden, the Crimson Giant's body suddenly dissolved into a puddle of viscous bloody sludge that enveloped three of the giant ape's hands and one of its feet. The sludge then immediately began to exert enormous suction force that locked those hands and that foot firmly into place, making Han Li feel as if he had stepped into quicksand. At the same time, a series of peculiar golden threads appeared within the sludge, resembling a school of fish that was swimming through it, and they were traveling toward the giant ape's arms and leg. A sense of foreboding welled up in Han Li's heart as he detected the law fluctuations emanating from these golden threads, and he hurriedly drew upon his immortal spiritual power with all his might to try and extricate his arms and leg. But he was only able to pull them out around 10 feet before they refused to budge any further. At this point, the golden threads had already arrived and were piercing toward him like golden needles. Despite the layer of purplish-golden scales that covered his entire body, the golden threads were still able to pierce into his flesh without any impediment. As soon as the golden threads entered his body, Han Li was immediately struck by a numb sensation, immediately following which all of his immortal spiritual power began to surge out of his body in a frenzy like floodwaters through a broken dam. All of those thin threads were like a series of wide rivers that were channeling his immense immortal spiritual power out of his body and into that huge puddle of bloody sludge. Han Li struggled vigorously to try and break free, but with the rapid loss of immortal spiritual power, the light radiating from his body gradually turned dim, and he also shrank down rapidly in size. In just a few moments, he had reverted back to his normal human form, and half of his body was trapped in the sludge. He was still completely unable to move, but thankfully, the golden threads that were funneling his immortal spiritual power out of his body had also disappeared. Prior to unleashing his holy nirvana physique, he had already stowed away his transient guilt mask, and at this moment his exposed face was slightly pale, while his brows were tightly furrowed. Over 1,000 feet away from him, a part of the puddle of sludge began to surge like a wave, quickly manifesting the top half of Jeang Luan's body, while the bottom half of his body was still fused with the sludge on the surface of the sea. I really did underestimate you. You forced me to use the baleful spirit threads that I've been accumulating over the course of tens of thousands of years. If I don't manage to unearth all of your secrets, this will have been an extremely severe loss, Jeang Luan said in a cold voice. His complexion wasn't much better than Han Li's, indicating that the immortal spiritual power that had been funneled away hadn't been directed into his body. Whose orders are you acting under? Why do you insist on hunting me down at every turn? Han Li asked with a cold look in his eyes. At the same time, he had already summoned an immortal origin stone, which he was holding in his hand that was concealed within the blood sludge, and he was quickly absorbing the immortal spiritual power inside. I don't know whose instructions Fang Pan was acting under, but you should worry about yourself right now. How about you tell me why Fang Pan and the others were so eager to hunt you down? That would save me the effort of having to search your soul. The soul search technique that I use is rather unique, and I'm sure you wouldn't like it, Jeang Luan said. It just so happens to be the case that I've always been quite interested in soul search techniques, so I actually wouldn't mind seeing just what's so unique about yours, Han Li replied as a faint smile appeared on his face. Fine, if you insist on being punished, then I'll grant your wish, Jeang Luan harumphed coldly. As soon as his voice trailed off, he made a grabbing motion with one hand, and the long crimson saber appeared in his grasp. Immediately thereafter, he began to slide rapidly toward Han Li like a wave, then raised the crimson saber in his hand, and all of the patterns on the blade of the saber began to radiate dazzling crimson light before the saber was swung down upon Han Li. Han Li clenched his fists tightly before raising them with all his might, but he couldn't raise them at all, as if there were a pair of mountains strapped to them. The crimson saber projection reached him in the blink of an eye, but right when it was no more than 100 feet away and was about to strike his head, it suddenly slowed down to a snail's pace, as if it had sliced into layers of extremely resilient golden fabric. At the same time, Han Li's mantra-treasured axis appeared behind him amid a flash of golden light, and it was slowly revolving while the 40 or so lit time Dao runes on its surface were releasing circles of golden ripples. Several hundred feet away, Jeang Luan could sense the law fluctuations emanating from the mantra-treasured axis, and he discovered that no matter how much force he exerted, he was unable to force the crimson saber projection down any faster. A thought immediately occurred to him, and his expression changed drastically as he exclaimed, "Could this be? The power of time laws, burn him to death, hurry." Upon realizing that Han Li was able to wield time law powers, he immediately decided against trying not to harm Han Li's soul, and he shifted his focus to taking down his opponent as quickly as possible. The longer the battle wore on, the more he came to realize that Han Li wasn't someone that he could enforce his will over as he pleased. As soon as his voice trailed off, a shrill cry rang out in the sky, and the giant black crane swooped down from the heavens while flapping its wings vigorously to send a sea of scorching black flames sweeping directly toward Han Li. As soon as the black flames entered the golden ripples, the speed of their descent also slowed down to a crawl, rendering them unable to get close to Han Li for the time being. Right at this moment, a tiny fiery silver figure appeared on Han Li's shoulder amid a flash of silver light, and it patted its own belly as it cast its gaze toward the oncoming sea of black flames, looking as if it were eager to embrace the feast being offered. "Go on," Han Li instructed, and the fiery silver figure instantly sprang up into the air, then transformed into a giant silver fire raven that flew directly toward the sea of black flames. At the same time, a vast expanse of silver flames emerged from its body as well to clash against the black flames, while the silver fire raven itself pounced at the giant black crane. High up in the sky, a fierce battle ensued between the two huge birds, one silver and one black, as they released bursts of flames out of their wings. At this point, Jeang Luan's expression had already become extremely grim. He continued to force his saber down with one hand while making a hand seal with the other before plunging it into the bloody sludge down below. As soon as he did this, circles of runes instantly appeared out of thin air around his hand before spreading outward in all directions. The bloody sludge on the surface of the sea instantly began to churn as massive waves were raised before sweeping toward Han Li, but they were also unable to escape the fate of being slowed down by Han Li's mantra-treasured axis. The giant crimson waves around Han Li resembled a series of tall crimson walls that surrounded him from all directions, and it seemed that he was able to deal with all of the oncoming attacks with ease, but in reality, he was struggling immensely. He had exhausted too much of his immortal spiritual power, and even though he had been able to replenish some of it using an immortal origin stone, he still wasn't going to be able to support his mantra-treasured axis for long. Han Li made a hand seal with one hand as he chanted an incantation, and a vast expanse of azure light instantly surged out of the bloody sludge down below. Immediately thereafter, 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords appeared before traversing arduously through the sludge, releasing countless streaks of azure swordlight that intertwined to form a huge ball of azure light beneath him. Immediately thereafter, an earth-shattering draconic roar rang out, and the ball of azure light beneath Han Li exploded violently as an azure-coiled dragon rushed out before ascending straight toward the heavens. Han Li was standing atop the dragon's head, and thanks to the azure coil sword formation, he was able to force his way out of the bloody sludge and rise up into the air. He had only just steadied himself when the mantra-treasured axis behind him shrank down into a ball of golden light before flying back into his body. Han Li's expression remained unchanged as he scrutinized Jeang Luan intently while flipping a hand over to produce an azure pill. After swallowing the pill, he summoned another immortal origin stone, with which he began to replenish his immortal spiritual power while making a grabbing motion with his other hand. The azure-coiled dragon immediately split apart into 72 azure flying swords once again, then fused into a single azure longsword that flew into his grasp. With the mantra-treasured axis gone, Jeang Luan was able to move at his normal speed again, and he slammed his hands down onto the bloody sludge below to raise an enormous wave that propelled him into the sky. At the same time, he opened his mouth to release a translucent crimson thread that shot into the palm of his hand. The flesh on his hand was instantly exposed before slowly squirming as it fused itself into one with the crimson saber in his hand, and a pained look appeared on his face as he gave an involuntary groan. At the same time, the patterns on the surface of the crimson saber in his hand began to bulge like veins while pulsing incessantly, as if it really were a living creature with blood coursing through its veins. Jeang Luan's body was still fused with the bloody sludge down below, and a series of cobweb-like golden patterns had lit up all over his body, extending all the way down into the crimson sea below. As the veins on the crimson saber continued to pulse, the bloody sludge in the sea began to turn into pure, baleful blood Qi that flowed into the saber through these golden veins. As a result, the saber swelled to around twice its original size, and it was giving off extremely formidable law fluctuations, while the baleful blood Qi emanating from it filled virtually the entire area of the sea. By the time Jeang Luan was no more than 1,000 feet away from Han Li, all of the bloody sludge below him had completely flowed into his crimson saber, but the veins on the blade were still pulsing incessantly, as if it were yet to be satiated. His muscles began to slowly atrophy, and his cheeks also became sunken, making it appear as if the crimson saber were sucking him dry. Die! Jeang Luan roared as he swung his crimson saber through the air in a circle, causing the surrounding space to tremble violently, while unleashing a vast expanse of saber projections that swept toward Han Li. A grim look appeared on Han Li's face as he tightened his grip around his longsword, but instead of defending himself, he yelled, "Let heaven and earth be turned on their heads!" The orientation of the sky and the sea was instantly flipped, with the boundless sea taking the place of the sky, while the cloudy sky appeared down below, presenting an extremely bizarre sight to behold. This was naturally quite jarring to Jeang Luan, and it was very difficult for him to process exactly what had happened in a short time. All he could see was that his all-out slash was suddenly being directed toward the sea, which was the complete opposite direction to where Han Li was. He immediately gritted his teeth and forcibly changed the trajectory of his slash, wrenching his crimson saber upward so that his attack would be back on track. The massive saber projection unleashed by the crimson saber was glowing with golden light and emanating formidable baleful blood Qi as it tore Han Li's body in half down the middle. More saber projections immediately followed in a relentless barrage, and only after unleashing over 300 slashes did Jeang Luan finally exhaust all of the baleful blood Qi in his crimson saber. A string of resounding booms rang out as crimson light exploded in the air, and the clouds churned violently, while the surrounding space also shuddered incessantly. "There's no way you're not dead after that," Jeang Luan chortled, and at this point the saber in his hand had already reverted back to its original black color. As soon as his voice trailed off, the sound of someone snapping their fingers rang out in the sky, and heaven and earth were immediately restored to their original orientation. The sky was still filled with dark clouds, but a deep trench that was several hundred kilometers in length had appeared in the sea down below, within which crimson baleful Qi was surging incessantly, parting the seawater like a miraculous act of the gods. Jeang Luan's entire body instantly stiffened upon seeing this, and he slowly shifted his gaze upward with an incredulous expression, where Han Li was standing with a mocking sneer on his face, completely unscathed. "How?" Jeang Luan murmured to himself. Han Li's sneer grew even wider upon hearing this, and he eagerly rubbed some more salt into Jeang Luan's wounds. Everything you saw just now was nothing more than an illusion. The all-out attack that he had just unleashed had exhausted virtually all of his immortal origin stones and baleful blood Qi, leaving him unfit for further battle. In contrast, Han Li had taken advantage of this opportunity to replenish a large chunk of his immortal spiritual power through the use of immortal origin stones. At this point, it seemed like the outcome of the battle was already decided. Don't think you've won just yet. A vicious look appeared in Jeang Luan's eyes as he raised an arm, and the black saber, which had already detached itself from his body, was sent hurtling rapidly toward Han Li. In response, Han Li lashed out with his azure longsword to strike the black saber, but in the instant that the two blades clashed, a tiny crack suddenly appeared on the surface of the black saber amid a flash of crimson light. Han Li immediately tried to stay his sword upon seeing this, but it was already too late. A resounding boom rang out as a crimson sun, that was over 10,000 feet in size, rose up over the surface of the sea, radiating incredibly dazzling crimson light. In the next instant, a burst of devastating shockwaves erupted in all directions, sweeping up enormous waves that swept over the surface of the sea down below. Having just detonated his bonded treasure, Jeang Luan threw up a mouthful of blood, then crushed a black jade pendant that he was already holding in his hand. A cloud of black mist surged out of the crushed jade pendant to envelop his body, and he vanished on the spot right before the waves arrived. Meanwhile, high up in the sky tens of thousands of kilometers away, Jeang Luan's giant black crane steed let loose a sharp cry, sending a wave of scorching black flames sweeping toward the giant silver fire raven situated over 10,000 feet away. Immediately thereafter, it turned toward the direction where the crimson sun had just exploded with a hint of lingering fear in its eyes. Thankfully, it had been chased all the way here by the silver fire raven. Otherwise, just the shockwaves from that explosion alone would have been almost too much for it to withstand. In the face of the oncoming wave of black flames, the silver fire raven flapped its wings vigorously to release a series of balls of silver light, which exploded one after another into silver flames to destroy the approaching black flames. A hint of wariness flashed through the black crane's eyes, and it jeered, "Cease your futile resistance, your master is already dead." The silver fire raven faltered slightly upon hearing this, then let loose a sharp cry as the silver flames around its body swelled up before forming a giant fireball that was launched through the air, absorbing all of the scorching black flames in its path. The black crane had no intention of continuing this battle any longer, and it swooped down from the sky while the silver fire raven was obstructed by its black flames. All of a sudden, it changed directions in its flight, and a cloud of black mist appeared in the air tens of thousands of feet away in that direction. Jeang Luan then stumbled out of the black mist before landing on the black crane's back right as it was flying past. "We have to get away from here. Hurry!" Jeang Luan yelled in an urgent voice as soon as he landed on the black crane's back. The black crane didn't dare to delay, and it immediately flapped its wings vigorously to fly away. However, right at this moment, countless arcs of golden lightning intertwined in the air up ahead over 10,000 feet away, immediately following which a golden lightning formation that was several dozen feet in size appeared. Han Li then emerged amid a tumbling thunderclap with an azure longsword that was crackling with arcs of golden lightning, which he swung down upon Jeang Luan. A hint of despair appeared in Jeang Luan's eyes at the sight of Han Li. He had just detonated his bonded treasure, yet it hadn't managed to harm Han Li at all. He made a grabbing motion in front of his own chest, and a translucent round shield instantly flew out before situating itself in front of him. At the same time, what little remained of the baleful blood Qi in his body surged forth to manifest a suit of crimson armor. Before the spirit patterns on the suit of armor had a chance to completely take shape, the azure longsword had already arrived. An earth-shattering boom rang out as several dozen bolts of golden lightning erupted from the surface of the crimson shield, dancing through the air like whips of the lightning gods. A string of crackling rang out incessantly, and an acrid charred odor wafted through the air. Immediately thereafter, a faint crack rang out, and the crimson shield in front of Jeang Luan was shattered, following which Han Li's longsword came slashing down. All of a sudden, a burst of azure light appeared in front of Jeang Luan's forehead. The azure light was coming from his copper headgear, and it was able to stop Han Li's sword in its tracks. Han Li let loose a loud roar as golden scales appeared over his arms, and he forced his azure longsword down with all his might. At the same time, arcs of azure lightning erupted out of the runes on the sword to complement its attack. No! Jeang Luan let loose an indignant roar as the copper headgear on his head cracked open. Without anything left to oppose it, Han Li's longsword came crashing down to slice Jeang Luan's head into two, and the black crane began to plummet toward the sea as if it had been dealt a heavy blow. Right as it was about to land in the sea, it suddenly flapped its wings and increased its altitude before flying away into the distance. Without even requiring an instruction from Han Li, the Essence Fire Raven immediately set off in pursuit. Meanwhile, Han Li grabbed onto Jeang Luan's collar to catch his lifeless body, and after sweeping his spiritual sense over Jeang Luan's remains, his brows furrowed ever so slightly. Right at this moment, the shockwaves from the explosion of the Crimson Sun arrived, and even they were less than 1,000th as powerful as they would have been at the epicenter of the explosion. They still swept past Han Li as gusts of fierce wind, evoking within him a sense of lingering fear. He had only noticed that something was wrong in the instant that the black saber exploded, and it was already too late for him to defend himself. In that dire situation, all he could do was call upon his mantra-treasured axis again to delay the explosion of the Crimson Sun for a brief moment, and that window of opportunity allowed him to unleash his reversal true axis ability to escape. After that, he used his spiritual sense to determine Jeang Luan's location, then chased him down with his lightning teleportation formation. All of a sudden, a burst of black light flashed in Jeang Luan's right sleeve, and a black nascent soul wearing a transparent cloak flew out from within, then instantly vanished from the spot with a flash of black light. However, immediately thereafter, a loud explosion rang out, and the nascent soul stumbled out of thin air several thousand feet away amid a burst of violent spatial fluctuations. It turned around with a horrified expression to find Han Li looking at it in an expressionless manner, with a vertical black eye on his glabella. The law-destruction eye. Jeang Luan's heart was plunged into complete despair. Before the nascent soul had a chance to get away again, Han Li slashed his sword through the air to unleash a streak of azure sword light, which swept up Jeang Luan's nascent soul and the transparent cloak that it was wearing before tearing both to shreds. Even after Jeang Luan's nascent soul was completely vanquished, Han Li still made sure to inspect the surrounding area carefully with his bright-sight spirit eyes. Only after verifying that not even the slightest hint of Jeang Luan's aura remained did he withdraw his bright-sight spirit eyes, following which he stowed Jeang Luan's storage bracelet away before setting off in pursuit of the black crane. At this point, the silver fire raven had already caught up to the black crane, and it had formed a massive ring of silver flames to trap the black crane inside. The black crane was struggling with all its might to escape, but to no avail. Never could it have imagined that its master would be defeated by such an ordinary-looking young man, yet this was the undeniable reality, and it had no choice but to believe it. With Han Li closing in at a rapid rate, the black crane hurriedly yelled in a panicked voice, "Spare me, Senior. I'm a primordial bird with an innate mastery over fire attribute laws. If you spare my life, I'm willing to accept you as my master. Also, I know a lot of Jeang Luan's secrets." However, Hanli paid no heed to the Black Crane's desperate pleas for mercy, and he made a hand seal with one hand while plunging his azure longsword straight down with his other hand. A massive sword projection that was over 1,000 feet in length erupted out of the tip of the sword, piercing through the Black Crane's head in an instant. The Black Crane let loose an anguished howl before plummeting toward the sea, followed closely by Han Li, who reached down to pluck its nascent soul out of its head. The nascent soul was a projection of a tiny black crane, and it was struggling with all its might in Han Li's grasp with a horrified look on its face. The essence fire raven swooped down and transformed into a fiery silver child that landed on Han Li's shoulder, and there was a clear look of yearning in its eyes as it gazed upon the Black Crane's nascent soul. "You can have it soon," Han Li reassured with a smile, then closed his eyes as a burst of azure light emerged from his hand to envelop the nascent soul. A short while later, Han Li slowly opened his eyes with a series of mixed emotions in his heart. The Black Crane didn't have many memories that contained information on Fang Pan, but from what little memories pertaining to Fang Pan that it did have, Han Li could tell that Jeang Luan was telling the truth in that he didn't know who had instructed Fang Pan to come after him. In the Black Crane's memories, Han Li also saw that earthy yellow palace situated in the vast desert, as well as the black chains that littered the entire floor of the palace, and he immediately thought of the origin separation law chains. He saw the large black chair at the center of the palace, and a figure dressed in the white cloak seated on the chair, but no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to make out the figure's facial features. The Black Crane seemed to have been extremely fearful of this person, to the point that it didn't even dare to look directly at him. After a brief moment of silence, Han Li tossed the Black Crane's nascent soul to the fiery silver child, then flew onto the Black Crane's back to recover Jeang Luan's storage bracelet, among other items. The fiery silver child gleefully accepted the Black Crane's nascent soul, eagerly devouring it whole. A burst of light then began to glow through its round little belly, as if there were a scorching flame burning in its stomach. After extracting the Black Crane's demon core, Han Li turned back to the essence fire raven to find that, after devouring the Black Crane's nascent soul, it was beginning to stumble around as if it were drunk. However, through their spiritual connection, he could sense that it was fine, and he made his way over to the fiery silver child before plucking it up with one hand and withdrawing it back into his body. After that, he pulled out a pill and devoured it, then cast his gaze back toward the holy puppet sect with a contemplative look on his face. Given the situation that he had witnessed earlier, the holy puppet sect was most likely beyond saving, so if he were to go back, he would have only been risking his own safety for no reason. Furthermore, he had only been hired by the holy puppet sect for protection, and he certainly wasn't going to risk his life for the sect. On top of that, Jeang Luan had ventured into the holy puppet sect's restricted area prior to his, and even though he didn't know what Jeang Luan's objective was, now that he had slain Jeang Luan, going back to the holy puppet sect would have only spelled trouble. As for the reward for this mission, he was happy to leave it. After all, he had reaped a great deal of spoils from killing several true immortal cultivators on this mission, and those spoils were more than enough compensation. With that in mind, he took one final glance in the direction of the holy puppet sect before flying away as a streak of azure light. The seasons passed, and over a year flew by in a flash. On this day, a streak of azure light descended onto the Crimson Dawn Peak, then faded to reveal Han Li. He hadn't made any effort to conceal himself, so it didn't take long before all of the servants in his cave abode were assembled to see him in the courtyard, but Meng Yunggui and Sun Buzhang weren't among them. When did you get back, Qian? Han Li asked as he swept his gaze over the 8 servants. I only got back less than a month ago. Here are some spirit medicine seeds found by my brother and brother's son. They asked me to pass the seeds on to you, Meng Qian said as she handed Han Li a storage pouch. Han Li accepted the storage pouch, then flipped a hand over to produce 3 more storage pouches that he offered to Meng Qian as he said, Good. If you get the chance to meet them, pass these spirit stones and pills onto them. Also, you can distribute these pills among everyone in my stead. Meng Qian accepted the storage pouches as she nodded in response. Yes, Elder Li. Has anything of note happened on our Crimson Dawn Peak or in the sect during the past few years I've been away? Han Li asked. Everything has been fine on our Crimson Dawn Peak, and not much has happened in the sect either. However, I've heard that a golden immortal stage Tao Lord will be coming out of seclusion soon and will be preaching about the great Tao, but the spots are very limited, and generally speaking, only direct disciples are entitled to attend. Meng Qian replied with a hint of longing in her eyes. The same expression was mirrored on the faces of all of the other servants, but at the same time, they were also looking a little dejected. After all, they would have been sure to benefit immensely from hearing the preaching of a golden immortal, but they knew that true immortal servants like them had no chance of being allowed to attend. While it's true that hearing the preaching of a powerful cultivator is a brilliant opportunity, everyone's cultivation path is different. You can listen to the experiences of others, but ultimately, you have to figure things out for yourself. In order to fulfill the great Tao, you must forge a path of your own, do you understand? Han Li asked. Meng Qian faltered slightly upon hearing this before nodding in response, and the disappointment in the eyes of all of the servants immediately faded. All right, if there's nothing else you have to report, then you can all go for now, Han Li said with a dismissive wave. Meng Qian and the others extended a collective bow before departing. Meanwhile, Han Li remained standing on the spot for a while before entering his cave abode, and after activating all of the restrictions, he made his way into his secret chamber before sitting down with his legs crossed. With a sweep of his sleeve, he summoned a trio of storage treasures, which he had obtained from the 3 true immortals that he had slain back at the Holy Puppet Sect. Prior to this, he had been focused solely on making the return journey, so he didn't get the chance to examine his spoils. Now that he had finally returned to his cave abode, he was naturally eager to see what he had obtained. With that in mind, Han Li picked up a storage bracelet before emptying all of its contents, which spilled out onto the floor. However, after a quick inspection, his brows furrowed slightly in disappointment. These were the belongings of the burly man who had attempted to fight Han Li on his own, and he was so impoverished that his belongings consisted only of a few materials and spirit medicines, as well as several ordinary spirit treasures. Aside from that, there were only around a dozen immortal origin stones, a pile of spirit stones, and some other miscellaneous items. Given how impoverished he was, it was no wonder that he was willing to risk his life for that ubiquitous pavilion mission. Han Li could only lament his own ill fortune, but nevertheless, he still patiently categorized everything before stowing them away into his own storage bracelet. After that, he picked up the thin old man's storage treasure before emptying its contents as well. This time, he was much more pleased with what he saw. The majority of the old man's belongings consisted of materials of a high caliber. In particular, there were several crimson crystals around the size of human heads, and they were giving off fiery red radiance, as if they were red-hot chunks of metal. These crimson crystals were filled with extremely abundant spiritual qi, and there were fiery patterns on their surface that were giving off fire attribute law fluctuations, indicating that it was a type of material that contained law powers. Aside from that, there were also around a dozen treasures, most of which were spirit treasures, as well as several vials of pills, over 500 immortal origin stones, and a large pile of spirit stones. Han Li stowed these items away as well before turning to Jeang Luan's storage bracelet, which he had saved for the finale. He had already anticipated that Jeang Luan was most likely going to be quite wealthy, but he was still astonished by what he saw after emptying out the storage bracelet's contents. There were countless types of spirit materials and spirit medicines, some of which contained law powers, and setting aside the spirit treasures, pills, and scriptures for now, there were around 5,000 to 6,000 immortal origin stones as well. The spiritual light radiating from all of the immortal origin stones illuminated the entire secret chamber. And with all of this, in addition to everything that he had saved up thus far, he would most likely have sufficient funds to support his own cultivation for the next few centuries. Han Li immediately stowed the immortal origin stones away, before slowly sorting through the rest. Origin separation treasured scripture. Han Li faltered slightly after injecting his spiritual sense into a white jade slip, and a thought immediately occurred to him, following which he hurriedly began to inspect the jade slip's contents. By the time he removed the jade slip from his forehead, over 2 hours had already passed by. The initial section of the jade slip contained a devilish true immortal stage cultivation art of a very high caliber by the name of the Origin Separation Yin Devil Arts. It was said that one could cultivate this cultivation art to the high zenith stage, and it was no lesser in rarity than his mantra axis scripture. However, no matter how formidable this cultivation art was, there was no way that Han Li would abandon the mantra axis scripture for it. What he was more interested in were the secret techniques recorded in the latter section of the jade slip. In particular, there was a secret technique that allowed one to conceal their aura by sealing themselves, and that was very intriguing to Han Li. However, these secret techniques were very difficult to grasp, and they weren't something that he could master anytime soon. With that in mind, Han Li stowed the jade slip away before continuing to sort through everything else. What's this? All of a sudden, Han Li spotted a strange-looking yellow ball among the treasures. It had a diameter of roughly half a foot, and there were numerous profound yellow patterns engraved onto its surface, giving it quite a mysterious appearance. The ball had been buried under some materials earlier, so he hadn't noticed it initially. Furthermore, there were several white talismans adhered to the ball's surface, seemingly acting as a seal. Han Li brought the ball closer to his eyes for inspection, but was still not able to see anything special about it. Furthermore, it wasn't giving off any energy or aura fluctuations, and it didn't appear to have been a treasure. After a moment of contemplation, he decided to try and examine the item using his spiritual sense. However, as soon as his spiritual sense came into contact with the ball, the talismans adhered to its surface immediately began to emit dazzling white light that formed a covert formation that was invisible to the naked eye, keeping his spiritual sense at bay. Han Li was rather intrigued to see this, and he began to carefully examine these talismans. While it was true that these talismans were quite remarkable, it was clear that someone had placed them down in a hurry, and given Han Li's mastery in talismans, it wasn't going to be difficult for him to remove them. After a brief pause, he made a hand seal and cast a series of incantation seals into the talismans, while opening his mouth to release a burst of azure flames that enveloped the golden ball. Moments later, several dull thumps rang out in succession, as all of the white talismans disintegrated into specks of white light that were devoured by the azure flames. In the next instant, circles of spirit patterns appeared on the golden ball's surface, immediately following which beams of yellow light began to radiate from the yellow ball, making it appear as dazzling as the sun. The restrictions in the secret chamber immediately reacted, and countless azure runes appeared on the walls, forming an azure light barrier that attempted to contain the yellow light, but it was able to quickly pierce through the light barrier. Han Li was rather taken aback by this, and he made another hand seal to activate all of the restrictions around the cave abode, conjuring up light barriers of different colors to envelop the entire cave abode. The dazzling yellow light continued to proliferate outward, and it was able to pierce through several more layers of restrictions, but was ultimately intercepted. A faint crack rang out from the yellow ball, following which a series of bulges appeared on its surface, and it rapidly began to swell in size and transform. In the span of just a few seconds, the ball transformed into a yellow-robed middle-aged man with an authoritative appearance who appeared to have been in his 30s. This is an immortal puppet. The yellow-robed man had an earthy yellow complexion that was giving off a faint metallic gleam. It was giving off an immortal spiritual aura, much like a humanoid immortal treasure, much like Dowist Xu's past form. Han Li suppressed the excitement in his heart as his gaze fell upon the yellow robe worn by the puppet. Some of the designs on the yellow robe were ones that he had seen on many past occasions on other puppets in the Holy Puppet sect, leading him to wonder if this puppet was also from the same sect. With that in mind, he immediately thought back to when he first encountered Jeang Luan outside the Holy Puppet sect's restricted area, and it occurred to him that this was most likely the very thing that Jeang Luan had ventured into the restricted area to obtain. He had always been quite interested in puppets, and if this really were a true immortal stage puppet, then this would be a massive haul in itself. Thus, Han Li immediately cast an incantation seal into the puppet's body, and two specks of light emerged in the puppet's eyes, while a layer of yellow light surfaced over its skin. Immediately thereafter, a mountainous aura erupted forth, causing the surrounding spee and the entire cave abode to tremble violently. Han Li was watching all of this unfold with a calm expression, but internally, he was nowhere near as calm as he looked. However, the disturbance only lasted less than a second before abruptly subsiding, and the light radiating from the puppet's body faded, as did the enormous aura it had displayed. Han Li exhaled as a stunned look flashed through his eyes. The enormous aura that had just erupted out of the puppet's body had been extremely formidable, and he was unable to gauge exactly how powerful it was, but he was certain that it was beyond the true immortal stage. With that in mind, Han Li had to suppress his excitement once again as he made another hand seal. However, this time, no matter what he tried, the puppet displayed no further reaction. After some contemplation, Han Li closed his eyes and released his spiritual sense to inspect the puppet's internal makeup. A short while later, he withdrew his spiritual sense out of the puppet's body, then opened his eyes with an uncertain look on his face. He had never come into contact with an immortal puppet before, but given his expertise in the art of puppetry, he had already managed to track down the core area of the puppet, but to his surprise, the area was empty. Aside from that, the entire puppet was missing an energy source, so the reaction it had just displayed was most likely only from a tiny amount of residual energy left in its body. By his estimates, it was most likely going to require an enormous amount of immortal origin stones to operate this puppet. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Han Li, and he flipped a hand over to produce the golden ball that was Dowist Xu's core. Han Li made a hand seal and cast an incantation seal into the ball, and it quickly transformed into a palm-sized golden crab amid a flash of golden light. The crab clutched at its own head with its pincers and shook it around a little, then stood up in a rather unsteady fashion. The crab then cast its gaze toward Han Li as it asked in a slow voice, "What is it, fellow Taoist Han? Why have you?" It had been in a state of slumber ever since its return, and even now it was still rather groggy and lethargic. However, its voice suddenly trailed off as it turned around to stare intently at the yellow-robed puppet behind it. That's an immortal puppet, and a linked puppet at that. This is truly a rare find, Dowist Zai murmured to itself with golden light glowing in its eyes. It flew up from Han Li's hand as it spoke and landed on the puppet, crawling joyfully up and down its body while touching the puppet with its pincers. All the while, Han Li merely looked on in silence. Only after a full 15 minutes had passed did Dowist Zai stop what it was doing before turning to Han Li as it asked, "Where did you obtain this immortal puppet from, fellow Dowist Han? I can tell you that it's a puppet of a very high caliber." There was a clear hint of excitement in its voice as it spoke. "That's a long story, but this puppet should have some close ties with a sect known as the Holy Puppet Sect," Han Li replied in an ambiguous manner. "Holy Puppet Sect? I've never heard of such a sect before," Dowist Zai murmured to itself before turning back to inspect the puppet again. "By the way, what did you mean by linked puppet just now, Brother Zai?" Han Li asked. "Linked puppets are a very rare type of puppet. Generally speaking, once a puppet is refined, its power will be set at a certain level, and there's very limited potential for growth. However, linked puppets are different in that their combat prowess depends on the power of the spiritual sense of its user, as well as its degree of affinity to the user. To put it in simpler terms, it functions much like a treasure," Dowist Zai explained. "I see. It seems like you're very interested in this puppet. Is it something that you can use?" Han Li asked. "I haven't had a chance to fully examine the puppet yet, but it's an Earth attribute puppet, so generally speaking, only someone who's using an Earth attribute cultivation art will be able to use it. If you can reach the peak level of affinity with it, it should be able to display mid-golden immortal stage power," Dowist Zai replied. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "You possess lightning attribute powers, so?" "That's right, I won't be able to use this linked puppet," Dowist Zai confirmed with a nod. "I see," Han Li replied with a hint of disappointment in his eyes. While he possessed sufficiently formidable spiritual sense to use the puppet, he wasn't very adept in any Earth attribute cultivation arts, so even if he were to use the puppet, he wouldn't be able to use it to its full power. Dowist Zai was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "Having said that, if you give me a suitable environment and sufficient resources, it may not be entirely impossible." An elated look appeared on Han Li's face as he hurriedly asked, "What do you need, Brother Zai? I'll do my best to provide you with the right conditions." If Dowist Zai could successfully control this puppet, then he would have a golden, immortal stage ally on his side. "Firstly, I'll need a lightning formation. The formation isn't very complicated to set up, but it requires something that can continuously provide lightning power as its core, and that is the key that'll decide whether the modification will be successful. On top of that, I also require a large sum of immortal origin stones and lightning attribute top-grade spirit stones to ensure that the modification process isn't interrupted for even a single moment," Dowist Zai said. It opened its mouth to spit out a small golden jade slip as it spoke, and the jade slip flew toward Han Li, who caught it before injecting his spiritual sense into it. The jade slip contained the method required to set up a lightning formation, and just as Dowist Zai said, it wasn't very complicated. Aside from that, in order to maintain the formation, close to 1,000 immortal origin stones and a huge sum of lightning attribute top-grade spirit stones were required. It seemed like a massive cost, but it was no problem with Han Li's current wealth. "All right, I'll be able to set up everything for you in 7 days at the very most," Han Li said after a brief moment of contemplation. Dowist Zai wasn't all that surprised to hear this, and it replied, "It looks like you've done quite well for yourself since your return to the immortal realm, follow Dowist Han. In that case, I'll be counting on you." Several days later. Countless purple veins had been engraved onto the floor of the secret chamber, forming a large circular formation. The yellow-robed puppet was laying flat on a certain point in the formation, around which were standing 8 lengths of lightning restraining wood. Formation patterns had also been engraved onto the lengths of lightning restraining wood, and there were arcs of purple lightning flashing occasionally over their surface. At the very center of the lightning formation was an indentation, within which was embedded a round purple crystal. This was none other than the clam jewel that he had obtained from that giant clam while crossing the thunderstorm sea. At this moment, Han Li was standing at the entrance of his secret chamber, with Dowist Zai perched on his shoulder. He made a hand seal with both hands to cast a string of incantation seals into the purple clam bead at the center of the formation, and thunderclaps rang out one after another, as all of the formation patterns on the ground began to glow with dazzling radiance. Countless arcs of purple lightning emerged from the formation before springing up into the air to resemble a nest of wildly dancing lightning snakes. In the blink of an eye, the entire secret chamber was transformed into a world of purple lightning. "What do you think of this formation, Brother Zai?" Han Li asked. "You've done very well, fellow Taoist Han. In particular, that crystal at the center of the formation is very remarkable, and it seems to be holding an enormous amount of lightning power," Dowist Zai remarked as it pointed a pincer at the purple clam bead. Han Li gave Dowist Zai a recount of how he had come into possession of the clam bead, and after hearing the story, Dowist Zai said, "Prior to this, I only had a 30% chance of success, but with this setup, the chance of success has increased to 50%. After that, he crouched down before springing into the lightning formation as a streak of golden light. Countless arcs of lightning sprang out of all parts of the formation before converging toward Dowist Zai, while dazzling golden lightning appeared over its body. In the blink of an eye, it had been completely enveloped in a ball of golden lightning, following which it descended toward the yellow-robed puppet's chest. The ball of golden lightning vanished into the puppet's chest in a flash, and the puppet's body shuddered as dazzling yellow light appeared over its skin, while arcs of lightning crackled around its chest. The purple lightning in the formation was drawn to the puppet's chest before fusing as one with it, and the lightning immediately began to spread toward other parts of the puppet's body. The lightning immediately began to clash against the yellow light on the yellow-robed puppet's body, and explosions rang out occasionally, causing the entire secret chamber to shudder along with the lightning formation. Han Li was standing at the entrance, watching everything unfolding inside the secret chamber with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. According to Dowist Zai, the fusion process could take several decades or even over a century. The clam bead contained more than enough lightning power to support this process, and Han Li had prepared a sufficient number of immortal origin stones and lightning attribute top-grade spirit stones as well when setting up the formation. "Hopefully everything goes well," Han Li murmured to himself, then left the secret chamber and closed the door before setting up a restriction. Before long, he had already sat down with his legs crossed in another secret chamber. Now that he had set up everything that Dowist Zai needed, it was time for him to consider his own situation. With all of the immortal origin stones he had accumulated thus far, there should have been enough to support his cultivation for the next few centuries, barring any mishaps. However, that encounter with Jeang Luan on this trip to the Holy Puppet Sect was one that struck a great deal of wariness into his heart. Even though he had managed to slay Jeang Luan in battle, it was clear from the Black Crane's memories that this was far from the end of the matter. According to what Jeang Luan had said, even if their encounter hadn't taken place in the Holy Puppet Sect, Jeang Luan had been planning to search for him on the ancient Cloud Continent anyway, so he wasn't necessarily safe just because he was in the Blaze Dragon Dao. There was no guarantee that the enemy wouldn't pursue him to the Blaze Dragon Dao, and he had to consider what he was going to do if Fang Pan and Jeang Luan's master or some other formidable enemy came after him. With that in mind, Han Li swept a hand through the air, and the remaining lengths of lightning restraining wood in his possession appeared on the ground before him, along with some other lightning attribute spirit materials. Around a month later, Han Li was seated in the main hall in the courtyard outside the cave abode, sipping on a cup of spirit tea with a contemplative look in his eyes. Moments later, Meng Qian made her way into the room. Elder Li. Qian, I called you here because I have something important I need you to do for me, Han Li said as he set down his teacup with a serious expression. Meng Qian faltered slightly upon hearing this, then puffed out her chest as she replied, Please go ahead, Elder Li. Don't be so tense, it's not that serious, Han Li said with a smile, then pulled out a storage tool that he handed to Meng Qian. Meng Qian accepted the storage tool before injecting her spiritual sense into it, following which she looked up at Han Li with a hint of befuddlement in her eyes. Han Li said something to her through voice transmission, and a grim look appeared on her face. Is that too difficult a task? Han Li asked. Rest assured, Elder Li, I'll get it done even if it costs me my life, Meng Qian assured with a serious expression. Good, but do be careful, and don't let anyone else know about this, Han Li instructed. Yes, Elder Li. Meng Qian replied with a respectful curtsy, then departed from the room, flying away as a streak of crimson light. Han Li stood at the entrance of his cave abode, watching as the streak of crimson light vanished into the distance before also flying away himself as a streak of azure light. Only after 2 months did he return to the Crimson Dawn Peak, and during this time, he had sold most of the materials, spirit medicines, and treasures that he had obtained from the Holy Puppet sect in batches for immortal origin stones. He had also purchased a large supply of ingredients required for the pills that he was going to refine, and having completed all of these preparations, he returned to his cave abode, then activated all of the restrictions before making his way into the secret chamber. On the way there, a thought suddenly occurred to him, and he made his way to his medicine garden instead, specifically to the corner where the primary bean had been planted. To his surprise, he discovered that the seedling that had sprouted out of the primary bean had become several inches taller than before. It had taken the primary a very long time to germinate, but ever since then, its rate of growth had become a lot faster. As the seedling developed, the golden patterns on it had become a lot darker, but as for whether this supposed mutation was positive or negative, that was still yet to be seen. In any case, after witnessing the Dao warriors in action back at the Holy Puppet sect, he was very much looking forward to acquiring his own Dao warriors. With that in mind, Han Li pulled out his heaven-controlling vial before handing it to the nearby giant ape puppet, then made his way back to his secret chamber. Up to this point, all of the errands had been taken care of, and he exhaled as he flipped a hand over to produce a silver pill cauldron, which he set down at the center of the secret chamber. After that, he summoned the essence fire raven with a sweep of his sleeve, which descended near the cauldron as a fiery silver figure. After devouring and absorbing the black crane's nascent soul, the essence fire raven's aura had clearly become more powerful than before, and its facial features had also become a bit more exuberant and expressive. It seemed to have been aware of why it had been summoned, and after quickly flying in a circle around the cauldron, its round cheeks bulged, following which it blasted a large plume of silver flames out of its mouth to envelop the underside of the cauldron. Meanwhile, Han Li had already prepared all of the pill refinement ingredients that he had purchased into batches, and he sat down with his legs crossed. Several years later, The silver flames beneath the cauldron subsided, and the fiery silver figure jumped onto Han Li's shoulder, where it sat down in an obedient manner. There was a rather weary look on Han Li's face as he cast an incantation seal through the air, and a faint pop rang out as the lid of the silver cauldron flew up, following which a rich medicinal aroma instantly filled the entire secret chamber. After taking a whiff of the aroma, a pleased look appeared on Han Li's face, and he made a grabbing motion to draw around a dozen longan-sized white pills out of the cauldron. All of the pills were emanating faint wisps of white mist, giving them quite a profound and remarkable appearance. The white pills fell into a white jade vial that had been prepared earlier, and at this point, there were already over 100 of these vials placed beside Han Li. "That should be about enough," Han Li murmured to himself, then swept a sleeve through the air to stow the silver cauldron and the essence fire raven away before closing his eyes to meditate. He was going to prime himself into the best possible condition before going into seclusion. Over 200 years flew by in the blink of an eye, and the Crimson Dawn Peak had been closed to the outside this entire time. During this time, the Blaze Dragon Dao welcomed its largest bout of snowfall in the past 500 years, lasting several months. Not only were all of the northern branches of the entire Bel Tol mountain range covered in a blanket of snow, the same applied to the majority of the mountain range's southern branches as well, and that included the Crimson Dawn Peak. On this day, the snowfall finally subsided to reveal clear, blue skies, and Han Li's servants began to clear away the snow around the cave abode, led by Meng Xiang. There were very few people on the Crimson Dawn Peak to begin with, and Meng Yunggui and the others were yet to return from their outings. In particular, in the absence of Meng Qianqian, it was very quiet, and even the calls of the birds were particularly clear and audible. After all of the snow in front of the entrance of the cave abode had been cleared away, everyone went to the spirit medicine fields, which were protected by restrictions and formations, but the snow there still had to be cleared away. Otherwise, the melting snow would result in excessive water that would drown the plants. All of a sudden, the entire Crimson Dawn Peak abruptly shuddered, and an enormous pillar of golden light erupted straight into the heavens from the cave abode. All of the world's origin Qi in a radius of thousands of kilometers rippled violently, forming an enormous cloud that revolved around the Crimson Dawn Peak. Spiritual light of all types of different colors shone down upon the Crimson Dawn Peak, and the phenomenon only subsided after a long time had passed. Everyone had stopped what they were doing to observe the phenomenon, and Meng Qing hurriedly urged, "All right, let's all get back to work. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can go back to cultivate. Elder Li has provided us with an exceptional cultivation environment, so let's not squander it." Everyone immediately returned to work upon hearing this. They were already accustomed to all of the phenomena taking place on the mountain, and they knew that all of them resulted from Han Li's cultivation, but they still couldn't help but want to stop and watch whenever these phenomena took place. After all, these phenomena were being triggered by the cultivation of a true immortal. Inside the secret chamber of his cave abode, Han Li's entire body was basked in golden light, and there were 24 specks of golden light on his chest and abdomen that were glowing as radiantly as stars in the night sky. An enormous aura was emanating from his body, and it was as if he had been reborn anew. He had progressed to the late true immortal stage. During the past 2 centuries, he had constantly been consuming earthly pills to enhance his own cultivation, and he had finally managed to open those 4 remaining immortal acupoints. This rate of cultivation was naturally far faster than that of the average cultivator, but it was still significantly slower than before. It had only taken him around a century to open up the previous immortal acupoints, yet it had taken far longer than that just open up these final 3 acupoints. As the golden light gradually fused into Han Li's body, the phenomenon taking place within the secret chamber also subsided. Han Li exhaled as he turned and cast his gaze toward the mantra-treasured axis hovering in midair behind him. The Eye of Truth was shut, and at this point, all of the time Tao runes on the axis had already fully recovered. However, there was a hint of disappointment in Han Li's eyes. Even after his progression to the late true immortal stage, the number of time Tao runes on the mantra-treasured axis still remained stagnant at 108. This was clearly not just a matter of bad luck. According to the mantra axis scripture, opening up the final 4 immortal acupoints should have earned him 2 more time Tao runes. It was most likely the case that he had manifested too many time Tao runes by using the Eye of Truth to absorb the crystals created by the heaven-controlling vial, and the mantra-treasured axis had already reached its tolerance threshold. Having said that, Han Li was already prepared for this outcome, so he wasn't overly disappointed. A faint smile appeared on his face as he sensed the vast, immortal spiritual power in his body, and instead of immediately rising to his feet, he continued to remain seated on the ground. This breakthrough was naturally fantastic news, but there were more important things that he had to attend to right now. He flipped a hand over to produce the eye of the primordial Fey beast, and at the same time, the sound of heavy footsteps rang out from outside as the giant ape puppet strode into the room. It set down the heaven-controlling vial beside him, and there was already a drop of green spirit liquid inside it. Han Li took a deep breath as he picked up the heaven-controlling vial, then consumed the drop of spirit liquid inside without any hesitation. Once again, he was attempting to glean the laws of time. His immortal spiritual power began to circulate in his body, while the mantra-treasured axis behind him lit up with dazzling golden radiance, and the 108 time Tao runes on its surface were also flashing incessantly. A vast expanse of golden ripples appeared around him to envelop the entire secret chamber, and a burst of indescribably formidable energy fluctuations erupted in all directions. To Han Li, it felt as if even the flow of air in the surrounding area had slowed down, and he was able to hear everything with exceptional clarity. It seemed that everything around him had fallen into some type of profound tempo, and as time slowly passed, the golden light radiating from Han Li's body continued to flash, causing the level of brightness in the secret chamber to fluctuate incessantly. At this point, his body was already drenched in blood, but he paid no heed to that at all, as if it weren't even happening to him. All of a sudden, his eyelids fluttered slightly, and his eyes sprang open, following which 2 beams of golden light erupted out from within. He began to make a rapid string of hand seals, bringing his palms together and linking them together, before thrusting his joint index and middle fingers upward like a sword. All 108 of the time Tao runes on the mantra-treasured axis behind him instantly lit up at once. At the same time, golden light emerged between the palms of his hands before traveling to his fingertips, and a translucent golden thread that was as thin as a strand of human hair began to slowly extend out from his fingertips. However, it had only protruded around an inch out from his fingertips before it exploded into specks of golden light with a dull thump. The golden light in Han Li's eyes also slowly faded, and he looked down at his own blood-stained robes with a wry smile on his face. He had made some progress compared with last time he had attempted this, but once again, he had ultimately fallen just short of manifesting a time law thread. It looks like it'll be extremely difficult to glean the laws of time even by directly consuming the spirit liquid. Perhaps only by consuming a Tao pill will I have a chance of succeeding in this endeavor. It had now become apparent to him why Tao pills were so sought after in the immortal realm. The difference here was like that between directly consuming a spirit medicine and a pill refined with that spirit medicine as the main ingredient. A pill would give the consumer the best chance of gleaning the law powers contained within the spirit medicine, and that was naturally far more effective than directly consuming the ingredient itself. Thankfully, he had accumulated a substantial amount of wealth and was able to easily obtain spirit ingredients that contained the power of time laws. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been a feasible path for him to pursue. After heaving a faint sigh, he took a pill, and a layer of golden light appeared over his entire body once again. Around half a month later, Han Li departed from his secret chamber, then made his way to the spirit medicine garden in his cave abode. The medicine garden was filled with abundant spiritual qi and was thriving with vitality. Inside the field, the giant ape puppet was holding an azure wooden bucket in one hand, out of which it was scooping pails of shimmering azure spirit liquid onto the garden. This spirit liquid had been mixed using the recipe stipulated in the book on planting Tao warriors given to Han Li by Dowist Hu Yan, but he had been using it to water his other spirit medicines rather than on the primary bean. Han Li swept his gaze across the various spirit medicines in the garden, and his eyes lit up as his gaze fell upon one corner of the garden. The seedling that had sprouted out of the primary bean was gone, and in its place was a massive golden plant that was around 10 feet tall. Its trunk was an earthy yellow color, while its leaves had a golden hue. The leaves were riddled with countless golden veins that were stacked on top of one another in layers, and these golden veins stretched all the way from the leaves to the branches and the main trunk of the plant. Hanging below the layers of lush golden leaves were a series of azure bean pods, each of which was around a finger in length, and the bulges visible in the pods clearly indicated that they contained the beans that Han Li was aiming to grow. Han Li was very elated to see this, and he hurried over to the tree before walking a lap around it like a proud farmer, carefully counting the number of bean pods on the tree as he did so. In total, he counted 75 pods, and under the assumption that each pod contained 7 beans, that would have amounted to a total of over 500 beans, which, barring any mishaps, would have developed into over 500 formidable Tao warriors. However, these beans clearly hadn't reached full maturity yet. According to Dowist Hu Yan's book, once the Tao warriors reached full maturity, the trunk, branches, and leaves of the tree would gradually begin to wilt, supplying all of their nutrition to the beans. After that, the bean pods would break open on their own to release the beans inside. Due to the fact that the beans hadn't yet matured, Han Li couldn't sense any special aura from them, so he didn't know whether the mutation was positive or negative. However, Han Li wasn't overly concerned. There was a very good chance that the mutation had arisen as the primary bean had been watered using spirit liquid from the heaven-controlling vial, and anything that concerned the heaven-controlling vial generally wasn't a bad thing. Only after inspecting the tree for a while longer did Han Li turn to depart, but right as he did so, he spotted out of the corner of his eye that there were 2 small yellow flowers on top of the tree. He stopped to look at the flowers for a moment, and a perplexed look appeared on his face. He flipped a hand over to summon the book given to him by Dowist Hu Yan, then flipped it open to a certain page. A short while later, he stowed the book away again, but the befuddlement on his face remained. The book says that the flowering period of primary bean flowers is quite long, so they'll generally only bloom after the beans have reached maturity, and there's only supposed to be one of them, so why are there 2 here? Could this also be a result of the mutation? If that were the case, then that would naturally be a good thing, as the rate at which he could develop Tao warriors would be significantly increased. But as a safety precaution, he decided that it was best to consult Dowist Hu Yan about this situation. With that in mind, he turned and made his way elsewhere in the medicine garden. This area of the medicine garden was filled with various different types of spirit medicines, and there weren't many of them, but they were all giving off their own unique auras. These spirit medicines were all ingredients stipulated in the Tao pill recipe that Han Li had obtained, and due to the fact that he had obtained them at different ages, the degree of growth that they were displaying were all different. The oldest of these spirit medicines were several dozen blue plants that looked as if they had been carved out of ice. They resembled boneset herbs with glowing and translucent leaves, and he had acquired them from the floating mountain secret area. At the time, he didn't know what they were, and only later did he discover that they were none other than the hidden mist herbs stated in the Tao pill recipe. Due to the fact that these spirit plants had been growing deep within the floating mountain secret area, they had been left completely untouched, and several of them had already exceeded 100,000 years of age, making them fit to serve as Tao pill ingredients. Not far away from the hidden mist herbs, in a small area enshrouded within a small formation, were around a dozen seedlings that looked as if they had only just sprouted. These plants were known as Santhu sunflowers, and they had been brought back by Meng Yunggui over 100 years ago. This spirit medicine appeared to have been growing very slowly, but its root systems underground were thriving, and if they weren't enshrouded within this formation, they would have most likely stretched across the entire garden, making it impossible for the other spirit medicines to survive. Aside from the main ingredients, the supplementary ingredients on the Tao pill recipe were also quite difficult to gather. Meng Yunggui had been very fortunate to have come across these spirit plants, and on the way back, he had almost been killed by someone aiming to take the spirit plants from him. Thankfully, he was able to survive thanks to the protective treasures bestowed upon him by Han Li. After receiving a reward from Han Li for his efforts, Meng Yunggui cultivated on the Crimson Dawn Peak for over 10 years before resuming his spirit medicine search. In addition to Meng Yunggui, both Meng Qian and Sun Buzhang had also returned to the Crimson Dawn Peak once each during the past 2 centuries, but Han Li had been in seclusion on both of those occasions, so he wasn't able to see them. Meng Qian stayed on the Crimson Dawn Peak a little longer than Sun Buzhang, as she wanted to see if Han Li would come out of seclusion, and also because Featheryurn didn't want to part with the 2-headed griffin. Neither Sun Buzhang nor Meng Qian had been as fortunate as Meng Yunggui, and they were only able to find some seedlings or seeds of spirit medicines stipulated in Han Li's earthly pill recipes, but Han Li wasn't disheartened by this. Up to this point, even he had only managed to secure several of the spirit medicines listed on the Tao pill recipe, including that thistle spirit flower. And no one had responded to the spirit medicine procurement missions that he had released in the Transient Guild. After staying in the spirit medicine garden a while longer, Han Li made his way to another secret chamber. Standing in front of the stone door, Han Li swept a hand through the air, and a series of runes instantly appeared on the door, following which it slid aside to reveal an opening that was as tall as a grown man. The secret chamber was filled with purplish golden light, and bursts of crackling were ringing out incessantly from within. The lightning formation inside was still operating, but the 8 lengths of lightning restraining wood situated around the formation were looking a little dim, clearly having already been exhausted of much of their lightning power. At this moment, the yellow-robed immortal puppet was seated with its legs crossed at the center of the formation, and arcs of purple lightning were constantly flashing all over its body, particularly its chest. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he noticed that the indentation at the center of the lightning formation was empty, and the purple crystalline ball that was originally embedded in there was nowhere to be seen. "Brother Zai," Han Li called out to Dowist Zai through spiritual sense voice transmission, but the yellow-robed puppet displayed no reaction. After a moment of contemplation, Han Li decided to remain patient and wait. A long while later, the lightning surging over the yellow-robed puppet's chest began to converge toward the center before quickly disappearing entirely. At the same time, all of the purple lightning across the entire formation also vanished, and the spirit patterns on the lengths of lightning restraining wood gradually faded, while the entire formation ceased operating. A burst of golden light appeared in the puppet's chest, and a palm-sized golden crab slowly emerged from within, then crouched down before springing toward Han Li, who spread a hand open to catch the crab. "How did it go?" Han Li asked. Compared with before, Dowist Zai's aura had become far more stable, and there were numerous extremely thin purple veins on its 8 legs that could only have been noticed upon close inspection. "The construction of this immortal puppet is more complex than I anticipated. I thought that I would be able to forcibly alter its internal makeup with the assistance of the lightning formation, but it didn't quite work out that way," Dowist Zai sighed. "Don't worry about it, it was just an idea, and there's no need to try and force the issue. If the opportunity arises, I'll be sure to find you a suitable puppet in the future," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "I suppose we have no choice but to accept this outcome." Having said that, this was not an entirely fruitless endeavor. Even though I wasn't able to modify the puppet, I've examined every single part of it in meticulous detail during the past 200 years. If you so wish, you can spend 1,000 years or so cultivating a suitable Earth attribute cultivation art, and I'm confident that I can make it so that you can use 60% of the puppet's power. It won't be its full mid-golden immortal stage power, but it'll definitely be more formidable than the average early golden immortal cultivator," Dowist Zai said. "You were a complete immortal puppet in the past, so I naturally trust your expertise in the art of puppetry, but let's discuss this matter another time," Han Li replied in an ambiguous manner. While it was true that being able to control an early golden immortal stage puppet would have been a great asset, he didn't have time to consider this matter for the time being. Even though he was in the Blaze Dragon Dao, his safety wasn't guaranteed, so he couldn't just go into seclusion for thousands of years at a time like other immortals. On top of that, the Mantra Axis Scripture and the Great Universe Origin arts were more suitable cultivation arts for him to pursue, so he naturally had to prioritize them. Also, during this process, I discovered a hint of origin lightning power in the clam bead, so I attempted to refine it, and it replenished quite a bit of the energy in my core," Dowist Zai continued. "That's fine, that thing wasn't very useful to me anyway. In that case, there's no longer any need for this formation to continue to function, right?" Han Li asked as he cast his gaze toward the lightning formation on the ground. Dowist Zai shook his head in response, and Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light that disassembled the entire formation. Meanwhile, Dowist Zai raised its pair of pincers before crossing them in front of itself, and a bolt of purple lightning instantly shot forth to strike the yellow-robed puppet. A crisp crack rang out from the puppet, and it reverted back into a yellow ball amid a flash of dazzling yellow light. Immediately thereafter, Dowist Zai also reverted back into a golden ball, and both balls were promptly stowed away by Han Li. Around 2 hours later, a streak of azure light descended onto a white stone plaza on a mountain near the high, profound palace, then faded to reveal none other than Han Li. He made his way to the end of the plaza, and a large expanse of courtyards appeared before him. On the plaque that hung above the large red gate at the center were inscribed the words "100 Wine Cottage" in free-flowing characters, and he couldn't help but be amused whenever he saw the wobbly characters on the plaque. No matter how he looked at them, they always resembled a bunch of drunkards leaning on one another for support. Before he reached the entrance of the cottage, the gate was opened from the inside, and a pair of azure-robed servants emerged, carrying a large black urn between them. The two of them were familiar with Han Li, and they immediately set down the large urn before extending a collective, respectful salute to him. Han Li could smell a faint sour odor coming from the black urn, and he asked, "What is it that you're carrying?" "These are some distiller's grains that have gone bad, and Elder Hu Yan instructed us to tip them into a creek in the mountains," one of the azure-robed servants replied. Han Li nodded in response, then stepped around the pair of servants and made his way into the cottage. He had only just passed through the corridor in the front yard and made his way into the main hall when he spotted Elder Hu Yan emerging from the inner courtyard. To his surprise, Elder Hu Yan's hair was impeccably groomed, and his clothes were also in pristine condition. Even his stride lengths had increased slightly compared with before, and he couldn't help but wonder what could have happened in the past 200 years that had brought on these changes. "You must have the nose of a dog. I only just finished brewing several jars of 100-flower wine, and you've already sniffed it out. You came at just the right," Dowist Hu Yan declared with a wide smile. "Are you celebrating something, senior?" Han Li asked. Dowist Hu Yan faltered slightly upon hearing this, then scoffed. "Why do you think that? Are you thinking to yourself that there's no way someone as stingy as me would offer you wine unless there's something I'm celebrating?" Han Li merely smiled and offered no response. Dowist Hu Yan also smiled as he gestured for Han Li to come in. "Take a seat." After both of them had sat down, Dowist Hu Yan swept a hand through the air, and a white jade flagon and a pair of peony cups appeared on the table. He picked up the flagon and tipped it slightly to the side, and a stream of light azure wine instantly came flowing out of the spout and into the cup, while an intoxicating floral aroma began to waft through the air. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up upon catching a whiff of this aroma, and Dowist Hu Yan was very pleased to see this reaction. "Give it a taste." Han Li did as he was told, picking up his cup before taking a small sip, and his mouth was instantly filled with a sweet and aromatic flavor that wasn't harsh on the mouth in the slightest. "This is exceptional wine," Han Li praised after swallowing the wine in his mouth, and a proud smile appeared on Dowist Hu Yan's face upon hearing this. "This is indeed a fine wine, but its flavor is lacking compared with the red mulberry wine and the fire drop wine, so it's rather unlike the wines that you normally enjoy," Han Li remarked. "This wine was brewed for someone else, not for me to drink," Dowist Hu Yan explained with a smile. "Oh, is it for Dao Lord Yun?" Han Li asked in a seemingly casual voice. Dowist Hu Yan's smile stiffened slightly upon hearing this, and he put on an angry facade as he stowed the flagon away. "Just keep your mouth shut and drink your wine." Han Li smiled and offered no response. All of a sudden, Dowist Hu Yan's expression changed ever so slightly, and he remarked, "I didn't notice it earlier, but your aura has become a lot more powerful than before. It seems like you've been working hard." "I just so happened to encounter some strokes of fortune, and I went into seclusion for a while as well. I came to visit you as soon as I came out of seclusion," Han Li replied with a smile. "It must have been quite a significant stroke of fortune for you to have made such significant progress in just a few centuries. Also, why have you come to visit me? You're not the type to do things that won't work to your benefit, so you must have something to ask of me, right?" Dowist Hu Yan asked. "You know me very well, senior. I came to you because for some reason, the primary bean that I planted produced 2 primary bean flowers, which is at odds with what's stated in the book that you gave me, so I decided to come and consult you about it," Han Li replied with a serious expression. "2 primary bean flowers," Dowist Hu Yan exclaimed with an incredulous expression. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly at the sight of his reaction, and he hurriedly asked, "Is there something wrong?" "Wrong? Things couldn't be less wrong. Generally speaking, a Dao warrior tree will only have a 50% chance of sprouting a primary bean flower, but not only has yours sprouted a primary bean flower, it's sprouted 2. It's not that this has never happened before, but it's extremely unlikely. How are you so lucky? I'm beginning to get a little envious of you, Dowist Hu Yan said as he picked up the red wine gourd strapped to his waist before taking a swig of its contents. Han Li was quite relieved to hear this. He had already guessed that this was most likely a positive development, and he was completely reassured after receiving confirmation from Dowist Hu Yan. He knew that this was most likely a result of the spirit liquid that had been used to water the primary being, rather than just a matter of dumb luck. But he naturally wasn't going to reveal that to Dowist Hu Yan. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to him, and he asked, if a Tao warrior tree doesn't sprout a primary bean flower, doesn't that mean it won't be able to produce another Tao warrior tree? That's right. Do you think primary beans are that easy to obtain? In the field of Tao warrior planting, the continuation of primary beans has always been a major problem. Forget it, you wouldn't understand even if I explained this to you, Dowist Hu Yan harumphed. In that case, it looks like I'm in luck, Han Li chuckled. Dowist Hu Yan rolled his eyes at Han Li before taking another swig of wine. Han Li paid no heed to Dowist Hu Yan as he mused in an excited voice. If I plant both primary beans, after a couple of centuries, I'll be able to develop twice the number of Tao warriors. If I were you, I definitely wouldn't waste those primary beans by simply planting them, Dowist Hu Yan interjected. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, then asked, why would that be a waste, senior? If you can maintain this streak of luck, then just a single primary bean would be enough for you to nurture more Tao warriors. As for the other one, you may as well keep it, and if you ever come across a high-grade puppet, you can implant it into that puppet, Dowist Hu Yan explained in a meaningful voice. Primary beans can be implanted into puppets, Han Li asked with a surprised expression. Some Tao warriors are puppets to begin with. As long as the attributes are matching, a primary being can be integrated into a puppet, and after that, the puppet will gain many characteristics of Tao warriors, such as the ability to regenerate severed limbs. As long as the core remains intact, the puppet will be virtually indestructible, and due to the fact that these puppets will have runes inscribed upon them from the primary being integration process, even if they fall into the hands of others, no one else will be able to use them, Dowist Hu Yan explained. Han Li immediately thought of the yellow-robed immortal puppet upon hearing this, and he said, that sounds incredible. Would you be able to impart the integration method upon me, senior? Why, could it be that you already have an immortal puppet in your possession? Dowist Hu Yan asked as he raised an eyebrow. Han Li's expression remained unchanged as he replied, of course not, but it can't hurt to be prepared. What if I am fortunate enough to come into possession of an immortal puppet in the future? You sure do like to cover all of your bases. The integration method isn't exactly a secret, so I can bestow it upon you, but I can't just let you have it for free, Dowist Hu Yan said as a sly gleam flashed through his eyes. Of course. I just so happen to have obtained a certain item recently. Let me know if it catches your interest, senior. Han Li flipped a hand over as he spoke to produce a thin, golden page. A pill recipe, eh? Don't try to placate me with just any pill recipe. At the very least, it has to be an earthly pill recipe, Dowist Hu Yan chuckled. He made a beckoning motion with one hand as he spoke, and the golden page rose up from Han Li's hand before landing in his grasp. Growth-bearing pill. This is indeed an earthly pill, and one that's fit for consumption for mid-true immortal cultivators at that. I suppose this will suffice, Dowist Hu Yan mused, then stowed the golden page away before flipping his hand over to produce a white stone shard that he handed to Han Li. Han Li accepted the stone shard before pressing it against his own forehead to inspect its contents. The formation diagram and the materials required to set it up have already been clearly annotated, and it shouldn't be too difficult to set up, but you must make sure to prepare a sufficient number of spirit stones to support its operation. Otherwise, If it runs out of spirit power for even a single moment, then the entire process will fail. The puppet won't be harmed as a result, but the primary being will be destroyed, Dowist Hu Yan cautioned. Thank you, Senior, Han Li replied with a nod as he removed the stone shard from his forehead. All right, if that's all, then you can go. I still have other guests to attend to later, Dowist Hu Yan said in a direct and straightforward manner. In that case, I won't take up any more of your time, Senior. Han Li rose to his feet and extended a parting salute, then flew out of the 100-wine cottage as a streak of light. He had only just flown to the edge of the mountain when he spotted another streak of light descending toward the 100-wine cottage, and it was none other than Bai Sayuan's mistress, Yun Nai. Back on the plaza in the Holy Puppet Sect, Bai Sayuan had referred to Qilin 3 as mistress, and Han Li was already aware of Bai Sayuan's identity, so he was naturally tipped off to the fact that Qilin 3 and Yun Nai were one and the same. Even though he hadn't been present during the final stage of the battle at the Holy Puppet Sect, he had learned through some other avenues that the person who had saved the Holy Puppet Sect in the end was none other than Dowist Hu Yan, and that he was also one of the Blaze Dragon Dao's 13 Dao Lords. Given what he already knew about Bai Fengyi, he had guessed that there were some ties between Dowist Hu Yan and Yun Nai, but seeing as Dowist Hu Yan hadn't mentioned this topic, he naturally pretended to have been oblivious. Of course, he had gone out of his way to unearth all of this information not just to satisfy his own curiosity. Instead, he was trying to find out whether the Holy Puppet Sect had launched a search for its lost immortal puppet. However, it seemed that not long after the attack, the Holy Puppet Sect moved away from those islands and seemingly disappeared. With these thoughts flashing through his mind, Han Li returned to the Crimson Dawn Peak. After entering the secret chamber of his cave abode, he flipped a hand over to produce the stone shard given to him by Dowist Hu Yan, and an excited look appeared on his face as he closed his eyes and injected his spiritual sense into the stone shard. The stone shard contained a formation that was very similar to the one that Dowist Zai had requested, indicating that there were many fundamental similarities between them, but there were some differences in the finer details and in the materials required to set up the formation. After inspecting the formation diagram for a moment, Han Li directed his attention to the materials and method required to set up the formation. In doing so, he discovered 5 different sets of materials depending on the attribute of the primary being. Among them, he placed his focus on the Earth attribute materials. After all, the Immortal Puppet was an Earth attribute one, and his primary being came from the Golden Dao Warrior, so there was a very good chance that it was also an Earth attribute one. Some time later, Han Li opened his eyes as he murmured to himself, "Infinity Sand." He then flipped a hand over to produce a pair of azure masks, one cow and one tiger. Han Li's gaze roamed back and forth over the 2 masks for a moment before he ultimately decided to put on the tiger mask. At this point, Worm 15 had already become a little too renowned for comfort, so it was best for him to switch identities. This was the first time that he was using the mask since obtaining it, and it gave him the identity of Raccoon 11. After that, he released an Infinity Sand procurement mission, and after some contemplation, he decided to release the same procurement missions for the Dao pill ingredients that he had already released using the cow mask. Only after doing all of that did he stow the mask away, before sitting down with his legs crossed to cultivate. Over 10 years passed by in a flash. On this day, Han Li was cultivating in his secret chamber, when he suddenly heard a string of loud booms ringing out from within his cave abode. His eyes immediately sprang open as he flew out of his secret chamber and traveled straight to his spirit medicine garden. As soon as he entered the garden, the loud booms became even clearer. A hint of elation appeared on Han Li's face as he quickly approached the Dao warrior tree to find that it had already completely wilted, and the bean pods hanging from it had also turned yellow and were exploding one after another, sending dark yellow beans raining down onto the ground. Han Li caught one of the beans that had just erupted out of its pod, and he inspected it closely to find that its surface was riddled with golden lightning veins that would have been impossible to see had he not been looking at it so closely. He then injected a burst of immortal spiritual power into the bean through his fingers, and the golden lightning veins on the bean instantly lit up before releasing a vast expanse of golden lightning. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up upon seeing this. As it turned out, the mutation that these Dao warriors had undergone had granted them the lightning attribute. Right at this moment, an explosion that was clearly louder than all of the previous ones rang out, and Han Li looked up to discover that the two large bean pods at the top of the Dao warrior tree had erupted open at once, sending a pair of pea-sized primary beans flying through the air. He hurriedly reached out to catch the pair of primary beans before inspecting them closely as well. Aside from their size, these primary beans were almost identical to the other beans, except the lightning veins on their surface were darker, and the lightning power that was imbued within them was slightly more pure. At this point, all of the beans had already been ejected out of their pods, and the Dao warrior tree completely wilted away, rapidly turning from yellow to gray before disintegrating into dust, all in the span of just a few seconds. Han Li flipped a hand over to produce a yellow gourd, then patted the underside of the gourd, and a burst of yellow light immediately appeared at its opening, releasing a burst of tremendous suction force that sucked in all of the beans that had spilled onto the ground. Of course, not just any object could be used to store Dao warriors, and this gourd was something that Han Li had refined according to the instructions enclosed in Dowist Hu Yan's book. This gourd functioned very similarly to a storage pouch, but it was actually closer in nature to a spirit beast pouch, and while stored inside it, the Dao warriors could continue to absorb the world's origin Qi. In fact, if he wanted to keep nurturing the Dao warriors to elevate them to a higher caliber, he could even pour some premade spirit liquid into the gourd, and that was exactly what Dowist Hu Yan was doing with his Dao warriors. After collecting all of the beans, Han Li returned to his secret chamber in an excited manner. 2 days later, a ring-shaped formation that was around 10 feet in radius had been engraved onto the ground in Han Li's secret chamber. There were numerous indentations distributed throughout the formation, within which were placed various types of spirit materials and several immortal origin stones. At the center of the formation was a golden platform of a moderate size that resembled a city, with 4 walls on top to create a cavity, where the hundreds of Dao warrior beans were being stored. This formation was known as the Lightning Origin Locking Formation, and it was a lightning attribute formation recorded in Dowist Hu Yan's book that could be used to refine Dao warrior beans. The golden platform at the center of the formation was a small altar that Han Li had constructed using lightning-restraining wood, and it was the core of the entire formation. The refinement formation for Dao warrior beans had to be chosen based on the attribute displayed by the beans after they reached maturity, and Han Li had thought that these beans would most likely have taken after the golden giant and developed the earth attribute. But due to the mutation, these beans did still contain earth attribute spiritual power, but it was far outmatched by the lightning attribute spiritual power within them. Hence, when choosing a refinement formation, Han Li had decided on the Lightning Origin Locking Formation. After everything was set up in the secret chamber, he sat down with his legs crossed in front of the formation, then flipped a hand over to produce a pill, which he promptly consumed. Dowist Hu Yan had warned him that setting up this formation was going to be very taxing on his immortal spiritual power, so he had to prime himself into the best possible condition before commencing the refinement process. With that in mind, he sat down to meditate for a long time before opening his eyes and activating the formation. He made a hand seal with both hands, then pointed a finger at the golden platform at the center of the formation, and an arc of golden lightning immediately shot out of his fingertip before springing into the platform like a spirit snake. The sound of flowing electricity rang out as the entire golden platform instantly began to glow brightly, and countless arcs of lightning sprang forth in all directions, forming a spherical golden light barrier that encompassed the entire formation. At the same time, all of the top-grade spirit stones that had been embedded into the indentations on the ground also began to glow brightly, before releasing bursts of pure spiritual power into the formation patterns on the ground. At the same time, the golden platform began to tremble violently, and the beings inside also began to bounce up and down as a result. Han Li activated his bright-sight spirit eyes upon seeing this, then thrust both palms upward at once, and all of the beings were immediately raised upward by an invisible hand, emerging from the platform to hover in the air within the spherical light barrier. The two primary beings were hanging at the center like a pair of full moons, while the other beings were distributed around them like glowing stars. All of a sudden, Han Li switched to a different hand seal, and the golden patterns on the golden platform instantly lit up as a pillar of golden lightning erupted directly upward, striking the light barrier up above before splitting up into countless arcs of golden lightning. The two primary beings were situated at the very center of the pillar of lightning, while hundreds of arcs of lightning erupted in all directions to form a golden net that encompassed all of the surrounding beings. Within the net of lightning, all of the beings were interconnected by strands of lightning that resembled thin branches, while the pillar of golden lightning beneath the primary beings resembled the main trunk, giving the entire setup the appearance of a small golden lightning tree. The wisps of spiritual power released by the spirit stones on the ground flowed through the lightning tree's trunk and branches and into the beings, causing all of the lightning veins on their surfaces to glow with dazzling radiance. Han felt as if he were looking at a golden tree that was laden with fruit, and a pleased look appeared on his face. He took a deep breath before switching to yet another hand seal, and the entire formation instantly shuddered as specks of black light began to appear on many of the nodes in the formation, then connected together to form an extremely peculiar bestial design. The beast resembled a cow, but it had the horns of a dragon. It appeared to have been quite massive in stature, and its round belly was riddled with antiquated runes that were giving off formidable lightning power fluctuations. What was even more peculiar was that the beast only had a single leg, making it resemble a giant black hammer, and trailing behind it was a whip-like tail. This was a Lightning Qi, that was an extremely renowned spirit beast in the immortal realm, and it was born with the ability to control 9 heavens' true lightning. It would often pound its belly with its own tail to produce rumbling thunderclaps that warded off all evil and malicious entities. As soon as the bestial design took shape, Han Li took a deep breath, and he knew that the most important moment in the Tao warrior refinement process was about to arrive. He joined his palms in a new hand seal, then began to chant an incantation, and as he did so, the lightning Qi diagram on the ground began to glow with black light before rising up into the air, passing through all of the beams to reach the light barrier up above. The blue light in Han Li's eyes grew even brighter, and translucent threads formed by his spiritual sense began to fly out of his glabella before hurtling into the golden lightning tree. And at the same time, he was also sweeping his hand incessantly through the air. As he did this, all of the beans hanging from the golden lightning tree began to tremble slightly, and specks of black light began to appear around the lightning veins on the beans, indicating that the rune inscription process had officially begun. Outside the formation, Han Li's hands were moving in a rapid blur, yet the black veins that were appearing on the beans inside the formation were doing so at an extremely slow rate. Inscribing runes was an extremely painstaking process that was very taxing on one's spiritual sense, and the average true immortal would have most likely divided the beans up into batches for rune inscription to lessen the strain on their spiritual sense. While this was a feasible option, the downside was that, due to the fact that the beans were refined in batches, only the batch of beans that had refined with the primary bean would have a strong connection to the primary bean, while the same couldn't be said for all of the other beans. Under most circumstances, this wouldn't have had much of a negative impact, and the Dao warriors would have still been able to function as normal. But if the Dao warriors were required to set up formations, just as the golden Dao warriors had done, then their reactions would have been slightly slower. Thanks to Han Li's enormous spiritual sense, he was able to refine all of the beans in a single batch. Time slowly passed by, and a month flew by in the blink of an eye. Han Li was still completely engrossed in his work, oblivious to the passage of time. He brought his palms together in front of his chest, and the final inscriptions were made on all of the beans in the formation, following which the inscribed runes began to radiate dazzling black light. The blue light in Han Li's eyes faded upon seeing this, and there was a slightly weary look on his face, but he was elated to have finally completed this process. The light glowing from the formation in the secret chamber also gradually dimmed, as all of the arcs of golden lightning began to converge toward the pair of primary beans, while the lightning light barrier vanished. Shortly thereafter, the golden lightning also vanished, and all of the beans fell back into the golden platform. Han Li pulled out the yellow gourd, then patted its underside, and a burst of yellow light immediately appeared at its opening, releasing a burst of suction force that sucked in all of the beans. However, instead of allowing the pair of primary beans to be sucked into the gourd, he stowed them away into his chest pocket instead. After that, he exhaled deeply as he produced an azure pill, which he consumed before closing his eyes to meditate. The next day, in a certain snowy valley within the territory of the Crimson Dawn Peak, a streak of azure light descended out of the sky, then faded to reveal Han Li. He swept his gaze across the valley, then flew over to a relatively flat and open area. There, he removed the yellow gourd from his waist, then chanted an incantation, and the opening of the gourd immediately lit up with yellow radiance, following which a string of yellow beans flew out in rapid succession before landing on the ground. As soon as the beans landed in the surrounding area, each of them instantly transformed into an armored Dao warrior that stood at around 10 feet in height. They were rather similar to golden Dao warriors in appearance, but they were wearing suits of armor with lightning veins inscribed upon them, and all several hundred of them had arranged themselves into a uniform formation, presenting a formidable sight to behold. Han Li flicked a finger through the air, and a streak of azure sword Qi swept through the air before striking one of the Dao warriors on the chest. The Dao warrior was instantly sent flying with a resounding boom before landing heavily on the ground to create a huge indentation. In the next instant, the Dao warrior sprang out of the crater, and its armor had already pierced through, while a gash had also been sliced into its chest. But the gash wasn't very deep and didn't appear to have been affecting its movements at all. Han Li gave a slight nod upon seeing this. He had only used around 1% of his power to unleash that streak of sword Qi, but it still would have been too much for the average Grand Ascension cultivator to withstand, and the fact that it was only able to slightly wound this Dao warrior indicated that its defenses were even more formidable than he anticipated. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li decided to pit the Dao warriors against each other. Arcs of golden lightning flashed over their suits of armor, and they rushed into the valley at his behest, displaying far superior speed to the golden Dao warriors that Han Li had faced in the past. Upon entering the valley, the Dao warriors immediately split up into groups of two to engage in battle, and bursts of loud rumbling akin to formidable thunderclaps instantly rang out. The entire valley began to tremble violently, triggering avalanches on all of the nearby mountains. After some observation, Han Li discovered that these Dao warriors were very similar to the Golden Dao warriors in their style of battle, in that they were just as reckless and uncaring for their own safety. However, these Dao warriors were clearly displaying superior regenerative abilities, able to quickly recover from all injuries as long as they weren't completely destroyed, and that was a very encouraging sight for Han Li. After that, Han Li controlled the Dao warriors to set up a few formations, but the results weren't that great. However, he knew that this was due to a lack of practice, so he didn't pay it much heed. He was already very pleased with the power being displayed by the Dao warriors, and he stowed them away before returning to his cave abode. After entering his secret chamber, he flipped a hand over to produce a golden metal ball, then called out, "Brother Zai." Moments later, several rifts appeared on the golden ball, out of which a series of thin metallic limbs emerged, and the ball transformed into a palm-sized golden crab amid a string of metallic clicking. "Why have you called upon me, fellow Dowist Han?" Dowist Zai asked as it looked up at Han Li from the palm of his hand. "I recently came across a formation that can integrate a Dao warrior primary being with a puppet, and I wanted to discuss it with you," Han Li replied. "Are you considering fusing a primary being with that immortal puppet, fellow Dowist Han?" "I'm afraid that's not going to work on an immortal puppet that's missing its core," Dowist Zai said. Han Li remained unfazed, and he smiled as he urged, "Don't be in such a hurry to shut down the idea, Brother Zai. Why don't you take a look at this primary being first?" He then flipped his other hand over to produce one of the primary beings, which had a series of golden lightning veins over its surface, as well as an image of the lightning Qi beast. Han Li set the primary being down beside Dowist Zai, and the latter was immediately intrigued. It made a lap around the primary being, inspecting it carefully, then looked up at Han Li as it mused, "This primary being possesses both earth and lightning attributes. Are you thinking?" "That's right," Han Li interjected. "You were unable to fuse with the puppet due to mismatching attributes, but with this primary being acting as an intermediary, perhaps it'll work." Dowist Zai was silent for a moment, then said, "That is indeed a potentially feasible method. Can you show me the integration formation?" Han Li offered the stone shard to Dowist Zai, who grabbed onto it with one of its pincers. A short while later, it released the stone shard, then turned to Han Li as it said in a solemn voice, "The lightning formation that I asked you to set up earlier is one that works in a slow and subtle fashion, yet this formation is far more aggressive. If the process fails, this priceless primary being will for sure be destroyed. And that immortal puppet and I will most likely be harmed as well. Are you sure you're willing to take this risk?" Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, then said, "You'll be harmed as well if the process fails. That's something that I failed to consider. Having said that, risk and reward always come hand in hand. If you manage successfully fuse with that immortal puppet, you'll immediately attain golden immortal stage power, so I think it's still worth a try. Are you willing to take a gamble, Brother Zai?" After slaying Jeang Luan, Han Li had been able to spend the past 200 years in relative peace, but he had never been able to shake off this prevailing sense of apprehension. Hence, after accumulating sufficient resources, he had constantly been cultivating arduously in the hope that he would be able to manifest a time-law thread after reaching the late true immortal stage, so that he would be better equipped to take on golden immortal cultivators. But that endeavor had proven to be unsuccessful up to this point. Now that he had been presented with the opportunity to potentially gain a golden immortal stage ally, he naturally didn't want to pass it up. Dowist Zai fell into a hesitant silence. I won't force you to make any decision on this matter, Brother Zai. Also, there's one thing that I must make clear ahead of time. If the fusion is successful, you will be fused as one with the puppet and the primary being, thereby strengthening your connection to me. And due to the involvement of the primary being, you'll be more firmly under my control. This is unavoidable, and it's something for you to consider, Han Li said in a candid fashion. Dowist Zai remained silent for a while longer, then looked up at Han Li as it said, All right, I'm willing to give it a try as long as you don't forget the promise you made to me back in the spirit realm. All right, in that case I'll begin setting up the formation right away, Han Li replied with a nod. A month passed by in a flash. During that time, Han Li had opened up a larger secret chamber in his cave abode, within which was a complex formation with 8 lengths of lightning-restraining wood, with runes inscribed all over them distributed throughout. Various types of materials, including infinity sand, had been placed into the nodes of the formation, and there were also immortal origin stones embedded into several indentations around the formation. The yellow-robed immortal puppet was seated at the center of the formation with its legs crossed, and Han Li was standing outside the formation as he flipped a hand over to produce a golden metal ball. A string of mechanical clicking rang out, and the golden ball quickly transformed into a golden crab. Everything is ready, Brother Zai. You can begin, Han Li said as he turned to the golden crab. Dowist Zai offered no response, enveloping itself in a ball of golden lightning before flying toward the yellow-robed puppet's chest and vanishing into it in a flash. Han Li immediately sat down with his legs crossed upon seeing this, then made a hand seal as he began to chant an incantation. A burst of yellow light emerged within the secret chamber amid a burst of buzzing, and gusts of yellow wind began to sweep over the formation, forming a yellow vortex that enveloped the immortal puppet while also sweeping up all of the materials laid out across the formation. Immediately thereafter, a series of antiquated runes flew out of the immortal puppet's robes before flying into the vortex. As soon as the spirit materials in the vortex came into contact with these runes, they immediately disintegrated into powder before surging toward the immortal puppet. At the same time, Han Li flipped a hand over to produce one of his 2 primary beans, then tossed it forward, and the primary bean fell into the formation in a flash. Upon entering the formation, the primary bean hovered above the immortal puppet's head, and several runes immediately adhered themselves to it as well, but it didn't disintegrate. Instead, it abruptly lit up and produced a Tao warrior tree projection. The projection was around 10 feet tall, and it was rooted to the formation with the yellow-robed puppet enveloped within its trunk. Han Li made a hand seal before leaning forward and laying a palm against the ground, and as soon as he did this, all of the immortal origin stones in the formation lit up in unison, releasing a stream of immortal spiritual power into the trunk of the Tao warrior tree projection through its roots. The tree projection began to glow brightly, and all of the broken-down spirit materials vanished into the immortal puppet's body, while the yellow vortex faded away. The sound of flowing electricity rang out as the runes on the 8 lengths of lightning-restraining wood situated around the formation lit up, and arcs of golden electricity shot out like a nest of lightning snakes before converging toward the immortal puppet. At the same time, a burst of purplish-golden lightning erupted from the puppet's chest, and it was as if it had been draped into a large cloak of lightning. This was a clear sign that Dowist Zai had already begun attempting to fuse itself with the puppet, and Han Li immediately switched to a different hand seal upon seeing this. Right at this moment, a rumbling thunderclap suddenly rang out, and a giant golden crab projection appeared behind the immortal puppet with lightning flashing all over its body. Han Li's attention was focused fully on the formation in front of him as he thrust his palms forward, and the immortal spiritual power in his body surged forth like a mighty river. Bursts of rumbling rang out incessantly within the secret chamber, and the walls also began to tremble violently. Fortunately, Han Li had already anticipated this, and he had set up stabilization and isolation formations in advance. Otherwise, these tremors would have caused quite a disturbance over the entire Crimson Dawn peak. As the tremors grew more violent, the yellow and purplish golden light in the secret chamber also began to flash more erratically. Han Li continued to cycle through a string of hand seals to maintain the outflow of immortal spiritual power, and he had also released spiritual sense threads to connect the primary being, the immortal puppet, and Dowist Zai in order to forcibly integrate them. Inside the secret chamber, the golden crab projection and the Tao warrior tree projection shrank down in unison from around 10 feet tall to only 6 to 7 feet, then to 2 to 3 feet, and the yellow light and lightning enveloping them also began to converge toward the center. Only after a long while did all of the light completely condense into a fist-sized ball of golden light that was hovering in front of the immortal puppet's chest, and a tiny tree projection and a golden crab could be seen within the ball of light. At this point, almost all of Han Li's immortal spiritual power had flowed into the formation, and his spiritual sense had been severely depleted as well, resulting in a slightly pale complexion. "Fuse," he roared, and in the next instant, all that remained of the immortal spiritual power in his body surged toward the immortal puppet without any reservation. A faint crack rang out from the ground, and the immortal origin stones embedded into the formation also released all of their immortal spiritual power before shattering into pieces. A vortex of light abruptly appeared at the immortal puppet's chest to devour the ball of golden light, and a thick bolt of lightning erupted out of the puppet's body amid a rumbling thunderclap. It resembled a pillar of purplish golden lightning that erupted into the heavens, blasting straight through the ceiling of the secret chamber and causing the entire Crimson Dawn peak to shudder violently. Thankfully, the pillar of lightning faded after only a few seconds. Inside the secret chamber, Han Li's immortal spiritual power had been completely exhausted, so he could only withstand the blast of lightning with his profound immortal body alone, and he was sent crashing heavily into the wall behind him before throwing up a mouthful of blood. After steadying himself, he took a glance at the immortal puppet, which remained completely still. He sat down with his legs crossed once again, then swallowed a yellow pill before summoning an immortal origin stone that he held in his hand before closing his eyes to meditate. Only after around 15 minutes had passed did he reopen his eyes, before spitting out the remaining mixture of blood and saliva in his mouth. All of a sudden, the immortal puppet's eyelids fluttered, and it opened its eyes to reveal a pair of golden pupils. Han Li's expression remained unchanged, but internally he was extremely excited as he said, "Congratulations on attaining a new body, Brother Zai. I was concerned that something would go wrong with the fusion process, but it appears my concerns were unnecessary." The aura emanating from the immortal puppet's body indicated that it already possessed early golden immortal stage power. Perhaps it was due to the involvement of the primary being, but a spiritual restriction had already been planted deep in the puppet, ensuring that it wouldn't be able to turn on Han Li. "It's all thanks to your help, fellow Dowist Han. However, even though the fusion process was successful, due to the integration of the primary being, the power in my body is a little chaotic, so I'll have to go into seclusion for a while for everything to settle down," Dowist Zai continued. "That's not a problem. If you require any spirit stones or resources, feel free to tell me," Han Li replied with a nod. Dowist Zai nodded expressionlessly in response, then closed its eyes to meditate. Only now did Han Li allow a hint of elation to creep into his eyes, and he didn't linger in the secret chamber any longer, getting up to depart. With this matter settled, he had to turn his attention to something else that he had to do. Ali. A streak of azure light descended from the heavens, landing in front of the golden palace on the gourd peak to reveal Han Li. He took a glance up at the plaque above the palace's entrance, then made his way inside. The Immortal Medicine Pavilion was filled with medicine cabinets and was quite lively and bustling. At the moment, Yi Nanfeng was attending to an elderly man in front of a cabinet near the entrance. As soon as he spotted Han Li, Yi Nanfeng gave him a smile and a wave. Han Li nodded in response, then began to browse through the medicine cabinets on his own. Before long, the elderly man seemed to have found what he was looking for, and he promptly departed after paying for his purchase. Yi Nanfeng then quickly approached Han Li with a smile as he greeted, "Long time no see, Elder Li. It seems like your Immortal Medicine Pavilion has added a great deal of medicinal ingredients to its catalog since my last visit, Elder Yi," Han Li remarked as he withdrew his gaze from one of the medicine cabinets. "You have a keen eye, Elder Li. It's all thanks to Tao Lord Mu that we've gotten all of this new inventory," Yi Nanfeng replied with a smile. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, then asked, "Tao Lord Mu of the Flying Feather Peak. Is there another Tao Lord Mu in our sect?" Yi Nanfeng asked. "That's not what I meant. It's just that I heard that Tao Lord Mu has already been in seclusion for close to 100,000 years. Could it be that he recently came out of seclusion?" Han Li asked. "You must have been in seclusion for quite some time, Elder Li. No wonder your aura has become significantly more powerful. Around a century ago, Tao Lord Mu suddenly came out of seclusion, then took several of his direct disciples on a trip to the Upper R continent, and a lot of the new spirit medicines we acquired came from that trip," Yi Nanhua explained with a smile. Han Li nodded in response with a contemplative expression. "I see. Speaking of spirit medicines, I came here to purchase some today. Please take a look for me, Elder Yi. Every time you come here, you always bring me a lot of business, Elder Li. I don't mean to brag, but even on the entire ancient cloud continent, our Immortal Medicine Pavilion is near unmatched when it comes to the spirit medicine variety that we offer." Yi Nanfeng's voice suddenly trailed off, and his smile also faded as he inspected the list of spirit medicines in the Jade slip. Han Li wasn't all that surprised to see this change in Yi Nanfeng's expression. After a brief silence, Yi Nanfeng shook his head as he said, "As far as I'm aware, we don't have even a single one of the ingredients on your list." "It's fine, these spirit medicines are indeed quite difficult to find. Having said that, I'm sure you have many sources and connections, so if you can supply me with any information regarding any of these ingredients, I'd be happy to pay for it," Han Li said. A slightly awkward look appeared on Yi Nanfeng's face, but he still replied in a polite manner, "I'm afraid I won't be able to help you, Elder Li. All of the spirit medicines on your list are extremely rare, and there are some that I only vaguely recall reading about in some ancient scriptures. Of course, I'll be sure to keep an eye out for any information and inform you if I do come across some leads." "You have my thanks, Elder Yi." Han Li didn't waste any more time here as he cupped his fist in a parting salute. He had been searching extensively for the final few ingredients on the Tao pill recipe, exhausting virtually all of the avenues available to him, but to no avail. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Yi Nanfeng and he said, "Don't be disheartened, Elder Li. Under normal circumstances, it would be next to impossible to find these ingredients, but there may be some better chances for you at the moment." "Oh, what do you mean by that, Elder Yi?" Han Li hurriedly asked. Yi Nanfeng drew a little closer to Han Li, then said in a quiet voice, "This hasn't yet been made public knowledge in the sect, but I've heard that in a few more years, Tao Lord Bailey will be coming out of seclusion. Han Li was rather taken aback to hear this. Tao Lord Bailey Yan was the #1 Tao Lord of the Blaze Dragon Tao, and it was said that he had already reached the pinnacle of the golden immortal stage, so he was only one step away from becoming a high zenith stage Jade Immortal. However, he was always in seclusion, and very few people in the sect had ever seen him. You only joined the sect in the past 1,000 years, so it makes sense that you aren't aware of this. After all, the last time Tao Lord Bailey came out of seclusion was tens of thousands of years ago. Traditionally, whenever he comes out of seclusion, Tao Lord Bailey would always hold a preaching ceremony. When that time comes, not only will all of the sect's elders be in attendance, many fellow Taoists from all over the northern glacial immortal region will travel from far and wide to attend as well. With such a massive influx of outsiders, there will generally always be some auctions and exchange events taking place in the lead-up to the preaching ceremony, so perhaps you'll be able to find some of the spirit medicines that you're looking for there, Yi Nanfeng explained. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. I see. I was indeed unaware of all of this. Thank you for enlightening me, Elder Yi. There's no need to thank me, Elder Li. I'm sure news of this would spread throughout the sect soon anyway, Yi Nanfeng replied with a smile. Han Li didn't dwell on this subject any longer as he flipped a hand over to produce a jade slip, then said, Elder Yi, I have another list of ingredients here that I'm also trying to procure. The jade slip contained the ingredients required to refine a pill called the Myriad Axis Pill. The Myriad Axis Pill was suitable for late true immortal cultivators to consume, and he had obtained the recipe from Ping Yaozi. Now that he had progressed to the late true immortal stage, the pills that he had refined in the past were no longer effective, so he had to search for new pills. All of the ingredients required to refine the Myriad Axis Pill were quite rare and exotic, indicating that it was no ordinary late true immortal stage pill. He had sent out Meng Yunggui and the others several hundred years ago to search for the ingredients enclosed in the recipe, but they had only managed to find 3 or 4 of the supplementary ingredients, while the 3 main ingredients required to refine the pill remained elusive. After inspecting the contents of the jade slip with his spiritual sense, a wry smile appeared on Yi Nanfeng's face as he said, These ingredients are also quite rare, Elder Li. I'm assuming they were requested by that earthly pill master friend of yours, right? In particular, the Myriad Axis fruit, the Hierophal flower and the blood crystal lotus root are very uncommon. I can supply you with all of the supplementary ingredients, but out of the 3 main ingredients, we only have the Hierophal flower. He had always taken pride in the comprehensive nature of the Immortal Medicine Pavilion's inventory, but this was already the 2nd time that he had failed to fulfill an order. That's right. That friend of mine acquired an ancient pill recipe recently, but he's been unable to secure all of the required ingredients, and that's why he asked me for help. I'll take whatever you have here and find the rest elsewhere, Han Li replied. Close to an hour later, Han Li emerged from the Immortal Medicine Pavilion with a slightly pained look on his face. The ingredients for the Myriad Axis Pill were extremely expensive, and it had cost him a great deal of immortal origin stones, even though he had only bought a few batches. Among them, the Hierophal flower was the most expensive, with a single 1,000-year-old specimen costing 15 immortal origin stones. Thankfully, he could mature and breed the flower with the spirit liquid from the heaven-controlling vial, so this wasn't a big problem. After leaving the Immortal Medicine Pavilion, Han Li returned straight to the Crimson Dawn Peak. According to Yi Nanfeng, there were still several years left until Tao Lord Bailey was going to come out of seclusion, and it was very likely that he would be able to find more of the ingredients that he needed around that time, but it was most likely going to be very expensive. He had already exhausted a great deal of funds in his prior pill refinement, and even though he still had a decent supply of immortal origin stones, it was best that he earned more as a safety precaution. After sitting down in his secret chamber, Han Li injected his spiritual sense into his storage pouch, then swept a sleeve through the air, and a bunch of objects emerged, including spirit treasures, cultivation arts, and materials. These were all spoils that Han Li had reaped from the 3 true immortal cultivators that he had slain at the Holy Puppet Sect, and he had already sold some of their belongings, but there was still quite a bit left. Given the circumstances, he didn't have time to complete any missions, so the only way to secure immortal origin stones in a short time would be to sell everything here. Han Li flipped a hand over to put on his tiger mask, then summoned the formation plate and listed everything laid out before him in the exchange column, making sure to list everything at a slightly discounted price in order to sell them off quickly. After that, he made his way to his medicine garden before pulling out a jade box, within which were several purplish-black spirit flowers that were giving off a peculiar aroma. These were the hierophal flowers that he had purchased. In order to secure more seeds, he had to wait for the flowers to bear fruit, and that was only going to happen once they reached 30,000 years of age, but that was naturally not a problem for him. He cleared out a new area in his medicine garden, then carefully planted the hierophal flowers. After that, he returned to the entrance of the medicine garden, and a series of emotions welled up in his heart as he looked at all of the precious and exotic spirit plants thriving in the garden. He had expended an enormous amount of time and effort to build up this medicine garden to its current state, and it was all thanks to this garden full of spirit plants that he was able to progress so quickly in his cultivation. After lingering in the medicine garden for a moment longer, he returned to his secret chamber before sitting down with his legs crossed. Without the support of pills, his rate of cultivation progression was going to be very slow, so instead of cultivating, he decided to continue appraising the 8.5 sentence mantra to see if he could reap any additional rewards. Just as Yinan Feng anticipated, it didn't take long for news of Tao Lord Bailey's imminent emergence from seclusion to begin spreading in the sect, and it was officially announced that the preaching ceremony would be held in 7 years. The entire Blaze Dragon Tao erupted into a frenzy with the emergence of this news. According to sect records, Tao Lord Bailey had held 8 preaching ceremonies up to this point, and every single one of them had been an extremely prestigious event, even in the context of the entire northern glacial immortal region. What was special about this ceremony was that there were no restrictions on the people who could attend. In other words, even the outer sect disciples of the Blaze Dragon Tao were able to attend. As for how much they would be able to get out of it, that was up to them. Apparently, this was a rule established by Tao Lord Bailey himself, and it had always been upheld. Some of the inner sect elders and direct disciples that were stuck at cultivation bottlenecks were extremely excited by this opportunity. There was always a chance that some words of wisdom from Tao Lord Bailey could address their cultivation problems and help them break through their bottlenecks. It was said that attending past preaching ceremonies was a major factor that contributed to many members of the sect ascending to the true immortal stage. Some disciples who hadn't yet reached the grand ascension stage were just as excited nonetheless. After all, Tao Lord Bailey already had half a foot in the high zenith stage, and being able to hear him preach was an extraordinary opportunity. 7 years flew by in the blink of an eye. This was not a short time for a mortal, but for cultivators, perhaps it wasn't even as long as the duration of a session of meditation. The gates of the cave abode on the Crimson Dawn Peak were opened, and Han Li emerged from within. Even though he had been in seclusion these past few years, he had made sure to keep up to date on the sect's affairs. Tao Lord Bailey's preaching ceremony was going to take place in 7 days, and he had originally intended to come out of seclusion earlier than this. But while appraising the 8.5 sentence mantra during his seclusion, he had inadvertently gained some insight into the aura concealment secret technique enclosed in the origin separation yin devil arts. Only on this day did he finally achieve initial mastery of the secret technique, and he began to chant an incantation as azure light surged over his body. Several chain projections appeared within the azure light before abruptly vanishing into his body, and his aura was instantly completely concealed, yet it wasn't forced in the slightest, and there were no signs to indicate the aura concealment that had taken place. Upon reaching the true immortal stage, unless one were to completely release their aura while in battle, it would generally be impossible for others to determine one's cultivation base and exactly how many immortal acupoints one had opened. However, someone with sufficiently formidable spiritual sense would still be able to glean the cultivation bases of others. But with this secret technique up his sleeve, even the average golden immortal wouldn't have been able to detect his aura. A pleased smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he flew away into the distance as a streak of azure light. Somewhere in the central region of the Bel Tol mountain range, all of the snow and ice within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers had melted away, revealing the lush greenery underneath. The sky was as clear and bright as a blue crystal, and white clouds were hanging between the mountains, while resplendent five-colored light shone through the heavens. Countless cranes were flying through the clouds while letting loose clear cries, and the entire place resembled an immortal paradise. At the center of the area was a pristine white mountain that was very smooth and uniform, resembling an enormous white jade pillar. The mountain severed halfway up with an extremely smooth cross-section, looking as if it had been sliced into two by a giant blade, creating an enormous plateau that served as a plaza. Even though only half the mountain remained, the white plaza was still situated far above the clouds. At the center of the plaza was a huge white jade platform that was close to 10,000 feet tall, with countless runes engraved onto its surface. A staircase led from the platform all the way down the plaza, and there were thousands of round cushions placed on the steps of the staircase. The ground surrounding the plaza was also riddled with countless cushions that stretched all the way to the edges of the plaza, and this platform on the white jade peak was where the preaching ceremony was set to take place. Prior to the commencement of the ceremony, the plaza was completely deserted. No more than several hundred kilometers away from the white jade peak was a city that stretched for thousands of kilometers, complete with countless lavish pagodas and pavilions that were concealed within the cloud and mist. In contrast with the deserted white jade peak, this city was extremely lively and bustling, and there were countless streaks of light flying through the air above the city. Occasionally, people would fly out of the city in different directions, while others converged toward the city from afar. Right at this moment, a streak of azure light arrived from the distance, then faded to reveal Han Li. He cast his gaze toward the white jade peak in the distance, then quickly withdrew his gaze before descending toward the city down below. The entire city was enshrouded within a huge azure light barrier, with Blaze Dragon Dao disciples stationed all around it. Upon his arrival, Han Li was immediately welcomed by a young Blaze Dragon Dao disciple, who extended a deep bow toward Han Li upon seeing his inner sect elder robes, then said, "Welcome, esteemed elder. Apologies for the delay, but according to the rules of the sect, anyone who enters White Jade City must first have their identity verified." "That's fine," Han Li replied as he pulled out his elder badge. The young disciple pulled out a white jade talisman that he waved at Han Li's badge, and a layer of white light emerged from the talisman to form a small screen of white light that displayed Han Li's image and information. The disciple took a glance at the information on the light screen, then flipped a hand over to produce an azure badge as he said, "Thank you for your cooperation, Elder Li. I'll open the restriction for you right away." With a wave of the badge, a streak of azure light shot out from within before vanishing into the light barrier that encompassed the city. The light barrier then shuddered before an opening that was large enough to fit a person appeared on its surface, and Han Li stowed away his elder badge before flying into the city through the opening. He made his way along a street, traveling deeper into the city while inspecting his surroundings, and a hint of surprise soon appeared in his eyes. Only after entering through the light barrier did he discover just how beautiful and lavish the buildings in the city were. The wide streets extended throughout the city like a system of cobwebs, and they were lined with opulent shops, presenting a stunning sight that didn't lose to any of the large cities that he had seen before. Outside of his cultivation, he had made frequent forays throughout the Bel Tol mountain range during the past years, but he had never visited this place before. The shops that lined the streets were selling all types of wares, including materials, pills, and treasures, all of which were of quite a high caliber. The wares being sold weren't inferior in the slightest to those sold in the markets in the Blaze Dragon Dao, and there were some things that were very rarely seen even in those markets. Many of the shop owners clearly weren't Blaze Dragon Dao disciples. Instead, they were most likely from subsidiary powers to the Blaze Dragon Dao, and they were aiming to sell some specialty local products during the lead-up to the preaching ceremony. After walking along the street for a while, Han Li stopped in front of a materials shop. From the entrance, he could see dozens of shelves inside, all of which were laden with precious materials. At this moment, the shop was filled with customers, and business appeared to have been booming. After a brief pause, Han Li stepped into the shop, and he was immediately greeted by a young, red-robed attendant. "What materials are you looking for, Senior? We have a comprehensive inventory of all types of spirit materials at competitive prices." Before the young attendant had a chance to finish what he was saying, an elderly man who appeared to have been the shopkeeper hurriedly approached Han Li as he said, "Go see if the other customers need any help. I'll attend to this customer myself." The young attendant faltered slightly upon hearing this, then promptly departed. "Welcome, esteemed elder. What materials are you looking for today? I am from the Yi clan in the West, and our clan has been selling spirit materials for generations. We are a reputable business, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed by our wares," the elderly man said in a respectful manner. Han Li didn't waste any time with words as he flipped a hand over to produce a jade slip, which contained a list of the remaining ingredients listed in the Dao pill recipe, as well as the other two primary ingredients for refining the myriad axis pill. The elderly man accepted the jade slip from Han Li, but after inspecting its contents, an apologetic look appeared on his face as he said, "These are all extremely precious items, and I'm afraid our shop does not have what you're looking for." "Do you know where I'll be able to buy these things?" Han Li asked. "I've only ever seen these materials in scriptures, and I've never heard of any being sold," the elderly man replied with a shake of his head. Han Li nodded calmly in response, then took back his jade slip before turning to leave, and the elderly man hurriedly accompanied him out of the shop. After emerging from the shop, Han Li continued to walk along the street, and a short while later, he made his way into another large materials shop. A short while later, he emerged from the shop, once again without any luck, but he remained unfazed as he continued onward. Close to a day later, Han Li emerged from a huge materials shop in the central area of the city, and his expression didn't betray much emotion, but internally, he was starting to feel quite frustrated. Thus far, he had visited most of the materials shops in the city, yet not only had he not been able to find what he was looking for, he wasn't even able to gather any leads on where he could find the ingredients on his list. There were still some shops left for him to visit, but seeing as the largest shops didn't have what he was looking for, the chances that he would find success in the remaining shops were quite slim. With that in mind, he heaved a faint sigh and was just about to continue onward when a voice rang out from behind him. "Brother Li." Han Li turned around to discover a white-robed man approaching him with a smile, and it was none other than Qi Liang. "Long time no see, Brother Qi," Han Li greeted with a smile. He had spent the majority of his time in seclusion, while the rest of his time was spent on completing various missions, so it had already been close to 300 years since he had last met Qi Liang. Qi Liang was just about to say something when his eyes abruptly widened, and he was silent for a long while before finally finding his voice again. "Brother Li, your aura. Could it be that you've already reached the mid-true immortal stage?" "Indeed. I encountered some strokes of fortune during the past few centuries, and I recently managed to make a breakthrough," Han Li replied in an ambiguous manner. Qi Liang could tell that Han Li didn't want to speak much on this matter, so he refrained from prying any further. "I am truly envious, Brother Li." "When did you get here, Brother Qi?" Han Li asked, promptly changing the subject. "I got here a few days ago, and I've been exploring the city ever since, but I didn't see you before this. Could it be that you only just arrived? Why didn't you come a little earlier? This place has already been thriving for quite some time," Qi Liang said with a smile. "Sounds like you've been busy, Brother Qi. My original intention was to come here a bit earlier, but I was delayed by some matters," Han Li explained with a smile. "I suppose you haven't really missed much. Generally speaking, the most precious treasures will only appear much closer to the preaching ceremony. By the way, I just so happened to be on my way to an exchange event for true immortal stage fellow Taoists. Would you be interested in tagging along?" Qi Liang asked. Han Li's eyes lit up slightly upon hearing this, and he immediately nodded in response. "Of course. I knew you wouldn't pass up such a great opportunity. The event venue is just up ahead, and it should be starting soon," Qi Liang said with a smile as he led the way forward. "I didn't know there was such a lavish city in the sect. Why is it that I've never heard anyone speak of it before?" Han Li asked. "White Jade City and the White Jade Peak are very important locations in our sect, and under normal circumstances, this city is closed to the outside. Entry is only granted during important occasions like the preaching ceremony," Qi Liang explained. "I see," Han Li replied with a nod. The two of them continued to chat, and after making their way down the street for a while, they turned onto another street, this one lined with buildings that were even more lavish and opulent, and many of them were enshrouded within light barriers of different colors. Han Li noticed that whenever the cultivators walking down the street cast their eyes toward these buildings, they would always do so with awe and veneration on their faces. "This is the place," Qi Liang declared as he stopped in front of a 3-story pavilion. This building was also enshrouded within a white light barrier that made it impossible to see into the building, giving it quite an aura of mystique. Qi Liang strode forward, then flipped a hand over to produce a white badge that was giving off a faint white glow with a scorpion design engraved onto its surface. With a wave of the badge, a streak of white light was released, and it vanished into the white light barrier in a flash. An opening immediately appeared in the light barrier, and it instantly closed after Han Li and Qi Liang had passed through. Only then was Han Li able to see the pavilion enshrouded within the light barrier in its full glory. It was an intricately constructed 3-story pavilion that was entirely a pristine white color and appeared to have been constructed from some type of special jade. Hanging above the entrance of the pavilion was a white plaque that bore the words, "Heavenly Scorpion Pavilion" in large characters, and some scorpion designs were engraved around the edge of the plaque, much like the badge that Qi Liang had pulled out earlier. This exchange event is being hosted by the Heavenly Scorpion sect, which is a subsidiary sect to our Blaze Dragon Tao. The Heavenly Scorpion sect isn't a particularly powerful sect, but it has a great deal of expertise in all types of restrictions and the refinement of Tao warriors, Qi Liang informed in a low voice. Han Li nodded in response with a contemplative expression. Qi Liang stowed his badge away before entering the pavilion. The furnishings inside the pavilion were quite lavish, with a lush red carpet on the ground and dragons and phoenixes engraved on the pristine white walls. The room was also surrounded by screens and immaculately pruned potted plants, resembling the interior of a wealthy family's estate. Several maidservants dressed in red were situated around the room, and they immediately extended respectful curtsies toward Han Li and Qi Liang. They appeared to have been no different from normal people, but in reality, they were merely Tao warriors, and all of them were giving off auras comparable to that of a body integration cultivator. Han Li took a closer look at these maidservants to find that their movements were very natural, and their eyes were also just as bright and full of life as a normal person. Having already refined a batch of Tao warriors of his own, he had naturally gained a far better understanding of Tao warriors, but even so, he was still unable to tell how the Heavenly Scorpion sect had managed to refine these Tao warrior maidservants. His Tao warriors were most likely far more formidable in battle than these Tao warriors, but they were far lacking when it came to how lifelike they were. Right at this moment, a young woman emerged from deeper in the building, and she extended a respectful curtsy to Han Li and Qi Liang. "Take us to the exchange hall," Qi Liang instructed. "Yes, please come with me, seniors," the young woman hurriedly replied, then led the two of them up a staircase to a hall on the third floor. The hall was quite large, but it was completely empty with the exception of some furniture. At the center of the room was a giant screen that bore an extremely lifelike scenic painting, making one feel as if they were situated in the depicted scenic location. Han Li inspected his surroundings momentarily, following which his brows furrowed slightly as he turned his gaze back to the screen. Right at this moment, the young woman chanted an incantation before releasing a streak of white light into the screen, and a layer of translucent white light instantly appeared on its surface. The scenery depicted on it instantly sprang to life in a flurry of movement, and it was also releasing black light that fused with the white light to form a black door. A hint of intrigue flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. The young woman continued to chant her incantation while making hand seals, and the black door began to glow brighter and brighter with black light while also rapidly expanding. A dull thump rang out as the black door flew out of the screen, hovering in front of it before opening to reveal a long passageway. "Go ahead, seniors, the hall is just up ahead," the young woman informed. Qi Liang nodded in response, then waved a dismissive hand, and the young woman quickly departed after extending a parting curtsy. "Let's go," Qi Liang said as he led the way into the passageway. Han Li strode through the passageway while inspecting it closely, and he could tell that the passageway had been created using an extremely advanced spatial restriction that resulted in a very stable space. Qi Liang could see that Han Li had taken an interest in the passageway that they were walking through, and he explained, "The Heavenly Scorpion sect is very adept in spatial restrictions, particularly ones that create independent areas. I've heard that many of the secret areas in our sect were created with the help of the Heavenly Scorpion sect." Han Li nodded in response, but his brows then furrowed slightly as he asked, "This is just an exchange event, not some shady, under-the-table deal, so why have they gone out of their way to hold the event in this separate space? Could it be that there are going to be so many people in attendance that they can't all fit in the hall outside?" "There won't be many people in attendance, but the Heavenly Scorpion sect has always had a habit of doing this, both to provide a private area for all of the event attendees, as well as to show off their expertise in spatial restrictions," Qi Liang explained with a smile. I see, Han Li replied with a nod. By the way, the exchange event here will be held once per day in the lead-up to the preaching ceremony. If you're interested, I can get them to assign you a Heavenly Scorpion badge, as well so you can come to the next few exchange events as well, Qi Liang said. I hope that's not too much trouble, Han Li replied with a smile. Of course not. With your formidable cultivation base, the Heavenly Scorpion sect would be scrambling to befriend you, Qi Liang chuckled. As they were chatting with one another, they reached the end of the passageway, where they arrived in a side hall and were greeted by an azure-robed elderly man with a warm smile on his face. Welcome, fellow Dowist Chi. May I ask who this fellow Dowist is? This is Elder Li, a good friend of mine who's also from the Blaze Dragon Dao. He's always in seclusion, so very few people know of him. Brother Li, this is fellow Dowist Chang of the Heavenly Scorpion sect. He'll be the one hosting the exchange event. It seemed that Qi Liang and the elderly man were very familiar with one another. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, fellow Dowist Chang, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a salute. The elderly man responded in kind. The pleasure is all mine, fellow Dowist Li. Brother Li only just got here today, so he doesn't yet have a Heavenly Scorpion badge. You wouldn't turn him away on that basis, would you, fellow Dowist Chang? Qi Liang asked in a joking manner. Of course not, fellow Dowist Qi. Fellow Dowist Li is more than welcome to attend our exchange events. Here's a Heavenly Scorpion badge for you, fellow Dowist Li. We'll be holding exchange events every day for the next few days, so feel free to come as you please, Dowist Chang has said as he offered a white badge to Han Li. You have my thanks, Han Li said as he accepted the badge. You're very much welcome, fellow Dowist Li. Please follow me. The exchange event will be starting very soon. With that, Dowist Chang led Han Li's duo out of the side hall, and they passed through a corridor before arriving in a circular main hall. The furnishings in this main hall were extremely lavish, and the ground was entirely paved with a type of premium material known as green pine jade. There were also many bright gems embedded into the walls to fill the entire hall with dazzling radiance. An antiquated little cauldron was placed in each of the hall's four corners, and there was a stick of burning yellow incense in each cauldron, giving off a refined and elegant aroma. At the center of the hall was a large round table, around which were placed around 24 chairs. The table and the chairs were all crafted from some type of blue jade material that was giving off a cool and refreshing energy, clearly indicating that this was some type of precious material. At this point, there were already around a dozen true immortal cultivators seated around the table, and everyone immediately turned to look at Han Li's trio as they came in. Some of them appeared to have been familiar with Qi Liang, and they only took a few glances at Han Li before averting their eyes. Han Li made no eye contact with anyone, and only after taking seat did he begin to inspect the people around him. Close to half of the people present were Blaze Dragon Dao elders, but Han Li only recalled 2 or 3 of them. As for those from outside of the Blaze Dragon Dao, he naturally didn't know any of them. Qi Liang had a large social circle and began to chat with many of the other people present, and the atmosphere in the hall gradually began to liven up a little. Han Li took no part in the conversations, merely sitting in silence as he casually swept his gaze around the table. With this tremendous spiritual sense, he was able to instantly determine that most of the cultivators present were at the early true immortal stage, while only 2 were at the mid-true immortal stage. One of those 2 was a portly middle-aged man dressed in Blaze Dragon Dao elder robes. He had a thin mustache and a pair of eyes that were constantly darting around, making him resemble a fat yet shrewd rat. The other mid-true immortal cultivator was a white-robed elderly man from outside of the Blaze Dragon Dao, and he was seated with his eyes closed, paying no heed to the people around him. The portly Blaze Dragon Dao Elder seemed to have detected Han Li's gaze, and he looked back at Han Li before flashing him a smile, causing his mustache to wiggle a little in a rather comical sight. Han Li was rather amused by this, but he naturally wasn't going to display his amusement. He gave the portly elder a slight nod, yet right as he was about to avert his gaze, a layer of black light suddenly appeared within the portly elder's eyes before quickly transforming into a pair of tiny vortexes. A burst of peculiar power erupted out of the vortexes to ensnare Han Li's gaze, and all of a sudden, Han Li found himself situated in a world that was filled with white mist. Several young women emerged from the mist, and their thin veil clothing didn't leave much to the imagination, as they made all types of seductive gestures toward Han Li with their alluring bodies. Han Li was able to instantly tell that this was an illusion, and he paid no heed to the women around him as he gently blew out a breath. All of the women around him instantly faded, and countless cracks abruptly appeared in the surrounding world of white mist without any warning, following which it shattered to reveal the hall that Han Li was situated in once again. The portly elder shuddered slightly, and the black light in his eyes was thrown into a state of disarray before fading away, revealing the stunned look in his eyes. Han Li cast a cold gaze toward the portly elder, in response to which the elder offered up an apologetic smile. This was only a very discreet clash between the two, but all of the other cultivators present were at the true immortal stage, so this naturally didn't escape their notice, and all of them were rather taken aback by this turn of events.